All four to Rengifo, so the tying run is on. We'll see if Paris has another late clutch home run in him.
And also some pretty good speed at first base.
Big lead again for Rengifo. He takes off. And Paris, it's a liner fair down the left field line. It's going to roll to the wall. Rengifo's around third. He will score easily. Kyron Paris making his way to third. The relay throw comes all the way through. It's a game-tying RBI trip. Chopper, tough play. Donovan will come home. Too late. Everybody's safe.
That's surprising.
The Angels take the lead.
I thought they might have a shot at flipping it quickly to second. That's a break. Huge, huge break. I mean, he had no chance at that play.
Swing and a miss, strike three. Say goodnight to the Cardinals. Ryan Johnson finishes it off. His first big league save. And the Angels win in 10, 5-4.
You know it's not ideal when we have to begin with highlights from the opposing team's TV network. That audio courtesy of the Angels television network last night. With Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Alex out at Enterprise Center rather today. He'll be joining us here shortly. He's out there at morning skate. We'll talk to Alex here in just a moment. The Cardinals last night, I don't think they played a terrible game, T-Bone. They ended up with double-digit hits once again. That is 4 consecutive games to begin the season where they have had at least 10 hits. They had 5 walks as well. They were getting on base with regularity. They scored 4 runs in the game. This is the formula that this team needs. The thing that surprised me about last night's game is the defense let them down. You had a bad play there, just a bad decision, honestly, by Brendan Donovan. You have to just take the double play ball there. Instead, he tries to go home, tries to get the out at home, and he never had a chance. You heard it from the opposing TV now. They knew. He had no chance there. Bad decision. The Angels got pretty lucky there. If he takes the double, you probably get out of that inning with 1 run scoring, and now you're going into the bottom of the inning and you're feeling a little better about it. They didn't. Ends up coming back to bite you, but whatever. It is what it is. So that happens, and then later on you have Pages taking multiple at-bats that you don't want him to because they're doing the thing where they're taking Ivan Herrera out earlier than maybe you would prefer, but they're also not anticipating him having 2 at-bats. You're trading 1 at-bat for the defense when you're in a 1-run game. This is a team that steals a lot. I suppose I get it to a degree, but all of the things we thought you could count on from this team, especially after watching them over the weekend, that's what bit them over the weekend, not the offense, and frankly, not even really the pitching. The pitching was fine yesterday, although not perfect. What did you make of their loss last night, 5-4 in extra innings against the Angels?
Yeah, the defense was my number one takeaway because it lets them down in that extra innings because you probably should just get out of that with allowing 1, and instead you have that decision by Brendan Donovan to where he tries to go home on a play that I was genuinely shocked that he made because Brendan Donovan's probably one of your smartest baseball players, and there was clearly never a play at home, especially because he was playing back defensively. If he was playing in, now you've got yourself a shot. Maybe I can understand then you taking it, but he's playing back to make that decision. Ends up leading to 2 runs because then they get a sacrifice fly on I think it was the next at bat. That's what killed you there in that situation because you cannot give up 2 when you're in that situation. And then the other thing was the Pages decision. You know, and we'll see. I don't want to overreact and go, this is going to happen all the time when they do this. This does have the scenario of playing out to where, hey, if you're going to go to Pages and you're going, in my opinion, what was early last night in that game, going a little too early because that was a long inning after Herrera's at bat, you guaranteed Pages at least 1 plate appearance based on when you decided to pull Ivan Herrera, and you end up getting 2 of them. And because of that, he comes up in a situation where you don't want him, which is in the bottom of the 9th, chance to potentially walk off that baseball game, and you don't have any other options on the bench. You're not going to burn your second catcher and pinch hit for him. That's not ideal. It's not an ideal situation to be in, and I don't mind going to Pages as a defensive replacement like they did on, I think it was opening day when he came in the 9th inning to try and help them solidify the defensive alignment. For 3 innings, though, makes you guarantee yourself that, okay, we're going to definitely see him bat once. And to do it in such a close game, which is probably part of the thinking from Ollie Marmol, I still think it's a little too much, right? I would trust my relievers and say, hey, we've got the stuff, keep guys off base, still limit damage, even if it does mean we're putting ourselves at more of a risk with Ivan Herrera behind the plate and that noodle arm. But I think yesterday that was too soon to pull Ivan Herrera and say, okay, we've got to go to Pedro Pajes here.
So let's hear from Ollie Marmol. He did explain this decision last night. There's a quote from Ollie on why he went to Pedro Pajes in that spot, and then there's also a follow-up question because there were some that speculated Ivan Herrera had a really bad at-bat in the bottom of the 6th inning where he strikes out swinging. Just looked like he completely lost all of his approach. And then in the inning prior, he forgot a count, which some wonder, did that play into the decision as well? So there's a follow-up there on that potentially playing into his decision. Here's Ollie Marmol from last night.
So he takes the at-bat in the 6th. It's not going to come up again to the 8th, and it had more to do with where we were in the lineup with Moncada, Hope, Magivo, Paris, Newman. 4 out of the 5 guys can run. You got a 1-run lead. It gives you the best chance to control the running game there. So you trade 3 innings of defense with that part of the lineup coming up for 1 at-bat. Unfortunately, it ended up being 2 at-bats in a meaningful spot there, but yeah.
But it wasn't related to the mix-up with Roycroft in the 6th. That was not
No. Absolutely not.
So I think that's an important clarification because this is truly Ollie saying we are trading offense for defense. And we know what the decision is there, and we're cool with it. We're comfortable with that trade-off, especially in a close, tight game, similar to what the Blues would do, where if they're tied or if they're up by a goal, they're not sending Jordan Kyrou out there sometimes. Like, Kyrou's just not hitting the ice because, hey, we got to make sure to either maintain this point that we have right now by not allowing a goal to go in prior to the end of regulation or by preventing the other team from scoring this goal that would force us to go into overtime. So they're treating Ivan Herrera basically the way that the Blues do Jordan Kyrou. And I honestly, and this is bad radio, I don't know how to feel about it because to a degree, I understand it. That guy looks bad defensively right now, man. The noodle arm is real, and it is coming back to bite you with regularity early on this season. Opposing teams have the scouting report, and if you have a dude that has any amount of speed, you're sending him at a moment's notice whenever Ivan Herrera is behind the plate. So that is problematic, and they've got to figure something out there. Maybe it is just, hey, we're going to live with it. It is what it is. Every single it has the potential to turn into a double against us because we have Ivan Herrera behind the plate, and we're going to live with that because that dude is amazing at the plate right now, and he's hitting the crap out of the baseball when he connects. So I do understand it to a degree. That is a real problem for them. But if Ivan Herrera is your catcher, and this is a transition season, and you want to find out what you have behind the plate, you do eventually probably have to give him a little bit more legway here and find out, can he handle this? Is he going to be a catcher long term? The answer might be no to that question. He might be a DH. He might be a future first baseman for you. I don't know. But that is the calculus that they're having to put into play here. And Ollie has a really tough job managing that situation because it seems like if they're up by 1 run late, if they're tied in a game late, like they might go to Pedro Pajes regularly in the 6th or 7th inning.
Yeah, I think with their actions, they're already telling you they already view that Herrera's not going to be a long-term catcher for them.
I'm not comfortable saying that yet.
I think otherwise, I don't know if you pull him in the 7th inning already. His arm strength's not going to get better from here. I mean, maybe because I thought the offseason throwing program would help with that. And it clearly didn't. It still is a major problem for him, and it's not going to get better in season. I mean, they even tried that last year by sending him down to work on that. I think his framing's still not where it should be behind the plate as well. I mean, he does not steal a ton of strikes for your starting staff. The problem for them right now is because they are in such a roster logjam, they can't pull him from behind the plate because you're right, they got to keep his bat in the lineup right now. But again, they're going to have to pull him after the 7th inning. And I think the problem that they're going to face is they're going to run into potentially, especially if they play a lot of close games where it is a 1-run game when they make this decision, they're going to run into the problem they had last night, which is you end up getting Pajes more at-bats than you want or are comfortable with, and you don't have another option to go to, especially if there's a lefty on the mound to pinch hit for him and then push Contreras behind the plate.
So that's the other thing that I wanted to get into here because I do think eventually if they're going to do this, they've got to be comfortable with Contreras being back behind the plate if you go to Pajes. I understand, Pajes is not a terrible hitter, and people will bring up Sunday and what he did there. Yes, I understand. That's the outlier. Pajes is what he is as a hitter. He is a backup catcher in every possible way. He's fine as a hitter. That is not the guy that you want taking a potential make-or-break swing for you as a team. And I would have felt more comfortable with one of Burleson or Gorman in that spot. I know that might sound crazy to some. I personally would have preferred one of those guys going up there, even against a lefty, taking that at bat than Pedro Pajes. And in that scenario, you would have had to go to Wilson Contreras in the 9th or 10th inning to then be your catcher behind the plate. I know they would prefer not to do that, but That's the way you can make this work. Otherwise, you're burning that catcher earlier in the game, and you have no ability to pinch hit for Pedro Pages. So I think that's something that they're going to have to start considering as we go along here is, hey, what does our plan look like with Contreras? Can he go behind the plate for an inning, 2 innings, if we end up needing to go to extras, and there's a huge at-bat coming up from Pedro Pages? I think that's something they've got to at least consider moving forward. But the biggest play of that game was Brendan Donovan. Like, we can talk until we're blue in the face about the decisions that Ollie had last night, whether you agreed with him, disagreed with him. Wilson Contreras, I don't think you can lay down a bunt in that spot when he did. In theory, it was like a team play. And if you have, in a typical game against a right-handed starter, Brendan Donovan behind you, Arenado batting cleanup, and then you have Alec Burleson as your 5-hole hitter, it at least makes more sense to me in that spot. Still don't love it because he's supposed to be your best hitter, but he's been struggling, and you need that run, so at least I can understand it. Dude, it was Luke and Baker behind him, and batting 5th in that spot was Pedro Pages at that point in time. So in that scenario, you absolutely cannot lay down that bunt. So that decision I thought was not great. But ultimately, it came down to Donovan. Donnie had a brain fart. He's a really good player. He makes that play 99 times out of 100. He got too aggressive in that spot. That's what lost you the game. Or at least lost you the ability to keep playing in the game.
It was all about that one play because it ends up changing. Once you get to 2 runs, you allow 2 runs in the top half. Things just get so much more complicated to win that baseball game. And it's hard to score 2 runs, especially at that point, as you mentioned, where their lineup was at, where you knew you had Pages that was running on second base because that's where it ended up at the end of the 9th inning. It put them in a bad spot. And I agree with you on the Contreras front. Look, I don't care if he was 0 for his last 50. That's your best hitter on your team. He should not bunt. And I am pro bunting. I seriously am. I am all in on, hey, Ciani's in the 9-hole. That guy should bunt in a situation like that. Not Contreras. I don't like seeing your best hitter going up there and basically wasting an at-bat where he can potentially change the game. So that was a major whiff on Wilson Contreras' part.
Yeah, I think so too. I thought there were some questionable decisions overall. I thought Ollie managed about as well as you possibly could in the first series of the season. I did not necessarily feel that way last night. The Contreras bunt, whether that was from the dugout or from Contreras, didn't love that call. The decision not to pinch hit for Masyn Winn at the end of the game, I get it to a degree. I would have gone to Gorman in that spot because you've got a righty on the mound, and Winn has really been struggling so far to start out the season. He acknowledged as much after the game. There were just some weird moments over the course of that game yesterday. I didn't know that he necessarily managed the best game possible, but it also speaks to the decision with Ivan Herrera. It also speaks to the position that they're in right now, which is, hey, sometimes we're going to make decisions that in the moment don't necessarily make the most sense in the world to you. But long term, we believe that they are in our best interest for not just 2025, but 2026 and beyond. That at bat for Masyn Winn, I think maybe was one of those moments for the Cardinals. Talk about that more as we go along today. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. The YouTube chat is off and running for you at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. Coming up in about 15 minutes, we might have seen our first glimpse into the high wire act that Ollie is trying to manage through this season with what he had to do last night. And coming up next, what kind of impact can Jimmy Snuggerud have on this Blues team? We'll talk to Alex Ferrario about that down from Enterprise Center next here on 101 ESPN.
For your chance to win a signed puck autographed by Blues forward Alexei Toropchenko.
Toropchenko, coast to coast, he scored!
Get entered to win that Alexei Toropchenko signed puck right now, either at 101ESPN.com or on your 101 mobile app. Powered by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Alongside Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. If you guys want to get involved in the show, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line to do so. You can always check us out on YouTube as well at youtube.com/101ESPN STL. So the Blues have made it clear at this point. It does appear Jimmy Snuggerud is going to be making his debut for the St. Louis Blues against the Detroit Red Wings. He will be playing on that third line alongside Oscar Sundqvist and Zach Bolduc. We now have Alex Ferrario joining us from the Blues broadcast booth at Enterprise Center. He's going to be broadcasting the game tonight. Our guy Curbs had a medical procedure. We're hoping that he gets back as soon as possible, but Alex has the call tonight. He will be on the call for Jimmy Snuggerud's NHL debut. Alex, what are you looking forward to? What kind of impact can Snuggerud have on this team, man?
I think he can have a really big impact, BK, and it's all going to come from the shot. I mean, I understand people's skepticism of putting him in a lineup in a run like the Blues are in right now with a 9-game win streak, of not wanting to put a rookie out there. I just think the way that Jimmy Snuggerud is built as a player, he makes an impact no matter what, because as soon as he releases the puck, it could be in the back of the net. Even Jim Montgomery was talking about it a little bit ago with us, and, you know, we just asked him what the expectations are, and he said, I always have the same talk with my players. If you're a grinder, I expect you to hit. If you're a centerman, I expect you to be responsible. If you're a shooter, I expect you to shoot. Don't pass up opportunities to shoot the puck. Make sure every time it's on your stick, you're releasing it. And the fact that he's playing in a third-line role, BK, tells me that, you know, you'll probably see 10, 12 minutes of this guy tonight against Detroit. But Jim Montgomery's on home ice where he gets the final line decision. He can juggle up the line combinations however he sees fit so that he can get mismatched to put a little confidence in Jimmy Snuggerud's game.
Do you like the scheduling, kind of like the way that it worked out for him? This wasn't by design necessarily. It's just how it happened. Like, you've got Detroit tonight at home. You've got Pittsburgh on Thursday, again, at home. And then you have the first real test, and it'll come at home against Colorado. How does that play into the way that they'll be able to get more information on Snuggerud prior to this playoff push that you have in the final couple of weeks with Colorado, Winnipeg, Edmonton, and Utah coming up?
Yeah, it's because they're on home ice, and I love it, BK. I mean, like, you put them on home ice so you get those mismatches. You get the opportunity, say, you get the last line change. Detroit puts their fourth line out there, and the Blues decide to go with Jimmy Snuggerud to try and get a mismatch. Like, I think this is the perfect opportunity to give him this game against Detroit. It is a struggling Detroit Red Wings team that's fallen out of the playoff race. And then after that, you see what it looks like. Does he look good? Does he look responsible? Can he handle himself? And if that's the case, well, then you move him over to Pittsburgh, and you let him play Pittsburgh, and you see if he can build confidence from 2 games. And then after Pittsburgh, you see where he's at. Can he play against Colorado? Should you not play him against Colorado? Where are the standings at? But, yeah, I think this is so much better than what we originally thought was going to happen, BK, because we thought this was just going to be he plays 1 game against Utah and then the season was over, or maybe you're in the playoffs. Now they got, 7 games to decide what they want to do with him from now until the end of the regular season. That's an opportunity to build some confidence.
I'm hopeful. I am a little cautiously optimistic, though, because I just don't know how he's going to translate, man. I mean, I look at some of the guys that we've seen come up to the NHL level in previous seasons, and Scott Perunovich, for example, immediately comes to mind. He's supposed to be this offensive contributor, right? And I know a defenseman is different. It takes a long time for defensemen to translate to the NHL level at times, but it just never happened for him, and it certainly didn't happen to a great degree early on in his career. Zach Bolduc, it took some time to get to where we are today. When you look at this, Alex, and you think about what kind of information we should be expecting over the next 3 games, hell, Dalibor Dvorsky played 1 game, and we haven't seen him ever since.
Yeah.
How much does tonight's game dictate what the leash is going to be for Jimmy Snuggerud, if at all?
I don't think it dictates it at all. I think Hitchcock used to talk about this to where it was like, the first game for rookies is just the first game. Get it out of the way and then move on from there. Continue the practice, continue the prep. So I did my my BK digging last night because I was just curious, when it comes to guys who have come from college that have gone straight to the NHL, like, what does that look like? And so David Backes didn't go straight to the NHL out of college. He went to the American Hockey League and had one full season before he got to the NHL. Jaden Schwartz was the one that I was most curious about. And Schwartz, if you remember correctly, that was the 2011-2012 season. And he jumped into the lineup and played the final, I think it was 7 or 8 games of that regular season. And he scored 2 goals in his first 2 games. By no means am I saying that Jimmy Snuggerud is going to score 2 goals, although me personally, I think it would be fun tonight.
Are you suggesting that you would like to be on the call for Jimmy Snuggerud's first NHL goal?
I'm suggesting that I have called one.
Don't do that on the call. What you just said
that's going to happen. Dude, now you're giving me the yips. Now you're giving me the yips. I am suggesting that I have called one NHL career goal, and it was Klim Kostin's, and that didn't bode well for me. So maybe if I'm a superstitious, although I'm not superstitious, I'm just a little stitious, maybe it's best if Jimmy Snuggerud doesn't score tonight or Thursday and scores on Saturday when Curbs is back. But my whole thought process was Jaden Schwartz was another highly touted prospect who was in college, played 2 years in college, and at the time when he decided to go pro, he joined a team that was chasing down 100 points and a top spot in the Central Division. And they put him in the lineup. He had an impact. He only played about 13 minutes that game, but he scored a goal. So that's where I think Jimmy Snuggerud can flourish right now. But let's say he plays 8 minutes tonight, BK, and doesn't look very good. It's not going to do anything. It's just going to be Jim Montgomery says, cool, we need a little bit more practices. Does he play Thursday? Probably not. And
so that's what I was getting at. That's what I was getting at is, does he end up with the the Dvorsky situation where gets in there, doesn't look great. They know they have a capable replacement there with Matthew Joseph, who's been part of this winning 8-9 straight games. Do they just go back to Matthew Joseph in that spot?
I think it's very possible. If they lose this game or if Snuggerud looks out of place, it's very possible that they go back to him. But, I didn't personally think Dalibor Dvorsky looked bad in that game. I think he was babied a little bit in terms of you want to put him in positive situations so that he can have success. But I was talking with Dylan Holloway a little bit ago. We'll have this audio in the 1 o'clock hour. But, because Holloway played in college. And then from Wisconsin, he went to the American Hockey League and got a couple of games with Edmonton. And he said, the speed is the first thing that you notice. He said, everybody's faster, everybody's stronger. And he's like, the mistakes you make are glaring. Like in the college level, in the American Hockey League level, they're glaring mistakes. But he said the difference between college and the difference between the AHL, it is just so much more organized on the ice. And that's where I think that if it doesn't go well for Snuggerud, Jim Montgomery is going to pluck him right out and go back to, as he says it, the horses that got them there. And if it does look good, or if he's fine and he comes out with a couple of shots, I think they try and capitalize on that and build on it, because you want him confident, BK, for the playoffs, because that shot is a difference maker.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, Snuggerud is the best college prospect that we've had. He's better than Oshie. He's better than Backes. He's better than Schwartz, and especially better than Perunovic. Just judging by prospect level, obviously. I mean, didn't Perunovic win the Hobie Baker?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. Now, to be fair,
might be better. He may
now,
be.
to be fair, the Hobie Baker that year was not the brightest competition in terms of the players that were around. I'm not taking anything away from Scott Perunovic. Sure. But yes, he did win the Hobie Baker, and to sit here and he was a second-round draft pick. Like, to sit here and act like he wasn't a highly touted prospect is just false.
It may be true, though.
It may be. The reason Snuggerud is so hyped, BK, is because of the shot. It's because he has a Vladimir Tarasenko-esque shot, but he's also got skill that goes with it. Again, Curbs was the one that told me that he was talking with somebody in the organization that said TJ Oshie plus. So
this name, somebody on the text line brought this up, Alex, and I'm going to mention the name, and you're immediately going to recoil.
I think I saw this one.
And you're going to say to yourself, that would be an absolute disaster. But hear me out on this.
If it's Zach Sanford, I am going to punch you in your nose when I see you.
It's not.
Okay, good.
I'm not sure it's much better, though.
If I told you that he becomes Mike Hoffman, how do you feel?
Ooh.
Mike Hoffman, let me give you some criteria here.
Oh, yeah, I remember Mike Hoffman.
A consistent 25 to 30 goal scorer for the first 7 years of his NHL career and was consistently around like 50 to 60 points in the NHL. Wasn't great defensively, consistently a second to third line player, really good on the power play as well, a big-time threat. 1 year with Florida, scored 17 goals on the power play. If that is what Jimmy Snuggerud ends up becoming, I know that I'm going to probably be seen as a total fool for this. I think I'd be okay with that. You're telling me I get a consistent 25 to 30 goal scorer. Given what I know about the team as it currently stands, I think I'd sign up for that and be like, okay, I can build around that because I've got the other stuff that I need around him, and he won't be exposed as a potential defensive liability on that top line because I don't necessarily need him to be on that top line for my team to work the way that it's currently constructed. How would you feel on that, Alex?
I would be fine with it. If you're asking me in the game that we typically play of hit the button and this is what he becomes, I wouldn't hit the button because I think he's got the potential to be a better all-around player on top of being a 25 to 30 goal scorer. But if that's like the floor for Jimmy Snuggerud, then yeah, that's a win in my book. I mean, you've got a guy who, Mike Hoffman, I know that the back end of his career tailed off, but think of when he was scoring all of those goals. That's when defense was still pretty tight around the NHL, and he was a 25 to 30 goal scorer, and he scored 228 goals in his 745 career. That's where I look at the career of Mike Hoffman and say, yeah, that one would bug me because there's a lot more hype. But I'm not going to press the button on it with Jimmy Snuggerud because I think there's more of an upside. I think he's a better all-around player.
I think I'm with Alex. I don't think I would press the button. And my fear with that is if he did become Mike Hoffman. I mean, I think Alex said it perfectly about the all-around game. I think that would become a guy that would become an odd man out. Hey, this guy's not playing well defensively, and we are a pack mentality that plays good defensively.
Even if he scores 25 to 30 goals.
Yeah, I mean, they got plenty of guys that can do that. I think what they would do is they would look for a better winger that is a more all-around guy. I mean, you mentioned the Backus quote a couple days ago, or maybe even yesterday, Alex, about, hey, in Boston, we had a group of guys, and if one guy didn't play to that system, then we got him out of here. That's a guy, Blues are building towards that they would say, if this guy's not going to play defense, he's not going to be in our lineup, and then Army would probably capitalize on his value on the market.
I totally agree with T-Bone there, and it's a great point. I didn't even think of it. But, yeah, they're building as a pack mentality, BK. I mean, Army pretty much said that to Pierre LeBrun in their piece yesterday. If you've got a guy who's not playing defense and is only out there for power play goals, I mean, Mike Hoffman is essentially what Patrick Laine is, and that's not gonna bode well with this team. And I think people will begin to be frustrated with it unless you're a 40 goal scorer. So yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say that if you're a 40 goal scorer doing that, then that works. If you're a 25 goal scorer consistently and you're a liability defensively, I think you become the odd man out.
And I think that's what the 636 brings up here, which is an interesting point. How was Kyrou perceived when he was a 25 to 30 goal scorer and a defensive liability? No thanks. I think my perspective on this, and I can only speak for myself, is I think that Kyrou was viewed as a savior of sorts, right? He had to be the number one winger because at the time that he came up, there was no other option for the Blues as young wingers that were going to become that next 30-plus goal scorer that had that like face of the franchise type of potential. That is not the case. Snuggerud is in a really advantageous situation for a young player where, hey, man, we've got Jordan Kyrou, we've got Jake Neighbors, we've got Zach Bolduc, we've got Dylan Holloway, we've got, even to a degree, like Dalibor Dvorsky, who's not a winger, I understand, but a young player as well. All of these guys are coming up at similar times, and Snuggerud has the advantage of being the last one that's plugged in. So the pressure goes to those other guys that we've already seen it because they need to continue to be what they already are. Snuggerud, hey, man, just come in and be whatever it is that you are right now at this point in your career. If he became a 25 to 30 goal scorer and was a bit of a defensive liability, I think it's something that for me, and again, I can only speak for myself, I would sign up for that. With Alex Ferrario and Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for questions and answers. But coming up next, Alex, we got to talk about some of the decision-making last night from Ollie Marmol. I'm curious your perspective on what we saw from him and how much of this was just our first real glimpse into the high wire act that he's going to try to pull off this year. We'll talk about that next year on 101 ESPN.
Alex Ferrario back with you to talk about my friends over at Classic Air Care. When it comes to your HVAC system, now is the time of year where you really need to have a company that you trust. And I talk about Classic Air Care specifically because I've used them since 2016. My dad's been using them for the last 30 years. And why I trust them is because when issues have come up in the past with my old units, when we first moved into our first home, it was a 25-year-old unit. And so I called Classic Air Care because I knew my dad used them. And what they did was I was a part of their maintenance agreement. They came out twice a year, springtime, fall time, before you turn the heater on, before you turn the air conditioner on, and they basically clean out the unit for you. They make sure that everything's good, all the dust and the gunk is out, the pipes are fine, and they fine-tune it. They make sure it's going to get you through the hot summer or the cold winter. But the best part about it is when there's issues that popped up, I called them and I got priority. So like a great example, this was back in 2017. It was like 103 degrees outside. Our unit went down. I called them on a Friday night. They were out there Saturday morning to take care of that unit, and it was because I got priority on their maintenance agreement. So you can get a part of that as well. You can schedule online. You can also ask for an instant quote if you're in the market for a new HVAC system, but get with the company that takes care of you, that makes people comfortable since 1926. Classic Air Care and ClassicAirCare.com.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Cardinals fell to the Angels in Game 1 of their three-game set last night, 5-4 in extras. Tonight, 6:45 first pitch. Kyle Hendricks will get the start for L.A. Matthew Liberatore will make the start for St. Louis. And the Blues back in action tonight as well as they take on the Detroit Red Wings. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then Alex will be on the call for Puck Drop at 7 with Joey Vitale. The Sports Center update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
All right, so we got to talk about Ollie Marmol's decision-making from last night. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Alex broadcasting live today from the Enterprise Center, where he'll be calling the game between the Blues and the Red Wings. Jimmy Snuggerud's debut tonight at 7 o'clock. Pre-game begins at 6 o'clock. Alex, it was a jumbled mess of a game for the Cardinals last night. And some of that, I think, had to do, much of it, honestly, with the position that Ollie Marmol currently finds himself in. This is not an easy spot as a manager. It's something similar to what we saw early on for Drew Bannister and what continued eventually, at times at least, for Jim Montgomery, where you're trying to play for today, but also keeping one eye on the future at all times. So last night you get into that game, and there were certain decisions, similar to over the weekend, honestly, we have to keep that in mind, where Ollie Marmol says, okay, I'm up by a run. I want to have my hands team in. And that means Michael Ciani potentially in some games. But yesterday it specifically meant, hey, Pedro Pajes has got to get in there behind the plate because we've already seen the Angels are a fast team. They are more than happy to put their runners into action on the base paths, and that is a problem with Ivan Herrera behind the plate. So the first big decision that Ollie Marmol made in the game last night was to remove Ivan Herrera from behind the plate in the top of the 7th inning when Ryan Fernandez entered the game, with Moncada, Ohapi, Rengifo, and Paris coming up to the plate, all of whom had some amount of speed. Pedro Pajes enters the game. At the end of the previous inning, we had seen Ivan Herrera take what was hopefully his penultimate at-bat. So they had one more left in the game. That was at least the calculus at the time. Here is Ollie Marmol talking about his handling of the catcher situation. We had already heard the decision specifically for last night, but this is him on how he's going to handle the catcher situation moving forward, Alex.
I'm going to be as honest as possible. It's a tough decision constantly that you agonize over whether that at-bat's going to come up again and if it's worth 3 innings of defense, right? And you look at where you are in the lineup. If we're at a different part of the lineup, probably let it ride, knowing that those guys don't run. But when 4 out of 5 guys can take a bag, you got a 1-run lead, it makes the decision for you. But what has to change? The reality is he's working really hard at it, and we're going to continue to go at it with him and come alongside of him and make sure that he's continuing to get better. But if there's spots where we can get better defensively, I think you owe it to the other 25 at that moment to do it, you know.
So this is where I have a little bit of grace for Ollie, but I don't know how that's going to play with our audience right now, Alex. I feel for him because he's right. Herrera's struggling, man. Herrera does not look great defensively behind the plate right now. However, the bat has to play. You have to get his bat into your lineup. It's one of the best so far for you this year. It was one of your best last year, and he had the entire offseason to work on his arm. It looks still like it's a problem for him. So what do you do? Well, when you're up by a run, I mentioned this earlier today with T-Bone, when you're up by a goal and you're the Blues, well, what do? You don't put Jordan Kyrou out there. You go with your guys that are better all-around defenders. When you're up by a run and you're Ollie Marmol, you're going to go to your backup catcher in Pedro Pajes, who's better defensively behind the plate. But that's not going to play for this audience, and it is something that is eventually potentially going to come back to haunt you the way that it did last night, where Pajes ends up taking not 1 but 2 critical at-bats in that game, one of which, if you had Ivan Herrera in the game, might have gone in a different direction. What do you make of the way that they're going to have to handle this catching situation moving forward, Alex?
It sucks. I mean, the difference in the baseball term versus the Kyrou is, you know, if you give up a goal without Kyrou on the ice, you could put him right back out there and he could try and win the game for you. You can't do that in baseball. When you pull Ivan Herrera out of the game, he's done. And now you don't have that bat anymore. On one hand, I understand where Ollie's coming from. And look, I appreciate the upfront honesty with him where he said, look, this is the mindset. But on the other, this is where I'm torn, BK, because where's Ivan Herrera's future with this team? Is it behind the plate?
I think that's what we're trying to find out right now, Alex.
I think if you were to ask the Cardinals management, or the Cardinals coaching staff, they would already tell you no.
I agree.
And if that's the case, then I can't get upset with them for pulling the guy out there that doesn't have a future as a catcher for this team. But you need his bat in the lineup. And that's where the other part of me was like, man, I wouldn't have done it. I mean, I understand it's a one-run game and you don't want these guys to start running on you. But to say that he's out there working every day and trying to get better at it, that's one thing. But he's got no confidence because he knows as soon as a situation like this pops up, they're going to pull him out of the lineup and he's not going to be in there anymore. So it is the toughest challenge that Ollie Marmol is going to have to deal with all season. I think it's that one and the Nolan Gorman decision of where those at-bats come from. But my big picture on it, BK, was looking at it as, look, Ivan Herrera is not their future catcher. So I can't be upset if they're going to pull him out because of the defense, but you're going to suffer the ramifications when he's not in there and you lose baseball games because his bat's not there.
And we've had a lot of people on the text line, T-Bone, I'm curious your thoughts on this. We've had a lot of people on the text line say basically, well, then just put him at DH. Like if he's not a catcher, then why are you even having him play the position? Okay, cool. Move him to DH. Now what?
Yeah.
Now you're trying to find more at-bats because you need to find opportunities. I mean, Luken Baker looked great last night against left-handed pitching. That is a guy that you want in the lineup against lefties. We've seen some criticism on the text line of having Luken Baker bat third. No, man. That plan worked to perfection.
He got on 3 times.
He was great.
He was better than all of your hitters.
It was everything you have that specific player on this team for. He fit his role perfectly last night. So you need to get him in there against left-handed pitching. Against righties, I want Alec Burleson to be in this lineup. Well, there's one spot that he can be, and it's the spot that we're currently saying Ivan Herrera could potentially go play. So you just create even more of a jumbled mess if you end up pushing Ivan Herrera to DH. That may be his long-term position. But for right now, you've got to play him at catcher because it's the only way that you can make this roster work.
Yeah, I think right now where they are at, because it is so early on in the season, they don't have answers on some of their questions of, okay, is Burleson, is Scott, are these guys going to be guys that we want in the lineup every single day? Can Nootbaar stay healthy? Until you start to get some answers, then can you start to push towards that path of, okay, Herrera clearly is a DH, he's not a catcher, and I don't know, let's say Scott quits hitting, so now we got to push Nootbaar into center field so we can put some Donovan in left, and then we can get Gorman in, and then let's say Gorman's not hitting. You have to get answers before you can just push Herrera to the DH spot. But what I would say to this catcher situation, especially in a one-run game, and look, this is where it is tough for Ali Marmol to balance this, and I get it, hey, we need to win, and so we're going to get, once we get up and we get to that 7th inning, we know there's one more at-bat coming. I would think still in a one-run game, I would trust. It's not about the catcher situation. It's about trusting the bullpen for me.
Yeah, that was it.
Hey, I look at we're going to Ryan Fernandez in the 7th inning. Okay, so if a runner gets on, our hope is Fernandez has his best stuff, and we don't have to worry about if that guy steals second base. Because if Fernandez is on, if Maton is on, if Helsley is on that night, guess what? You don't have to worry about if your catcher's going to be catching base runners because those guys shouldn't be giving up runs even then. So that's where I would look at this and say, I get the defensive perspective from Ali Marmol. And in just the, hey, who's the better defensive catcher when we need to go to the hands team? It's clearly Pages. To me, it was a little early last night because I would still look at that and say, hey, there's still one more at-bat coming for Herrera. We know it's coming. I mean, he was only, I think, 5 spots away, so he was guaranteed one more at-bat, and it would have been in the home half of the 8th, I think it would have been. I would look at that and I'd say, okay, I'm going to trust the bullpen to keep this a one-run game. Of course, they didn't last night. But then hopefully, if they do blow it, we still have our best offensive catcher in the game until we then need to go back to the defensive replacement if we get the lead back.
Yeah, I think moving forward, that to me would be the lesson from last night, is they did it too early. I think you do it after his at-bat in the 8th.
Agreed.
And you go to him in the 9th inning and you say, this is our, like, it's similar to what they have been doing with Michael Ciani, where it's like 1, maybe 2 innings after Jordan Walker takes that final at-bat. That is when you put Michael Ciani, enter him into the game. I think the same thing is probably true at catcher. The difference is, like, you may have 1 or 2 plays to right field over the course of the final 2, 3, 4 innings of the game. Maybe. Behind the plate, every play involves you. And so there is defensive value that is unaccounted for behind the plate, and it's impossible to measure. Like, you look at any of the metrics, it's impossible to measure the impact that a catcher can have on the game. So I feel for him, man. It's not an easy spot to manage, but whether it's that or Masyn Winn going out there and taking that final at-bat when he's 0-for on the season, he strikes out swinging and did not look particularly good in that at-bat. Like, these are situations where on one hand, you're thinking about the development and what it means for a young player. And on the other hand, you're thinking of how can I win this game today? And sometimes the two sides, they're clashing. And you've got to make a decision as a manager where your job is technically to put your team in the best position to succeed, to win that game. And instead, what you're doing is not trying to put your team in position to win that game, but to win the greatest number of games over this year and 2026, 2027, 2028, and beyond. I'll be interested to see how, if at all, yesterday's game impacts his decision-making process on the catcher situation moving forward, because it's something that will come up again soon.
My bigger issue with that game, BK, was the Nolan Gorman decision. Like, Nolan Gorman should have hit for Masyn Winn there.
Yeah.
And I understand the development side of, well, it's Masyn Winn. You want him to take that at bat. He went 0 for 5 in that game. He was 0 for 4 at that point.
He did hit the ball hard a couple of times. I'm not trying to give – I'm just like I wonder if that maybe went into their decision.
I get it, but it's a righty on the mound, and Nolan Gorman, of course, is still a part of the future, and he's got to stay ready off of the bench. That was the moment where you put him in there and you say, stay ready, kid. Go out there and get the big hit for us.
I agree with that 100%.
I would have done it in the moment as well.
I understand some people saying, hey, it's showing confidence in your young shortstop. Look, this is where Ollie has to be the manager and go to Masyn Winn and say, hey, man, look, you're just not hitting right now. We still have faith in you. You're going to be our starting shortstop. It's not like you're coming out of the lineup. Right now, you're just not swinging it well. We've got Gorman, who had a pretty good game on Sunday. Let's give him an at-bat. Later on in the year, we're not just going to pinch hit for you if you're hitting it. That's not going to be what the issue is going to be. And then his excuse post-game of, well, we had to keep our shortstop in the game in case we got to the 11th.
Let's hear that real quick, because Ollie Marmol, after the game, was asked about whether or not he considered swapping Gorman for Winn in the 10th. Here's what you're talking about there, T-Bone.
In that ninth inning, was there thought given to Gorman for Winn there in that last spot? Or?
Thought, yes. I'm gonna keep Winn at short, but thought, obviously, yes.
Yeah, their whole thought process of, hey, well, we got to have our shortstop for the next inning. Well, you got to get to the next inning, right? And that's where I don't understand of the kind of scared managing, I would call it. And I think this is one gripe I have of Ollie. And I think Ollie's a good manager. I've been on the pro Ollie side for most of his tenure here in St. Louis. I think at times he manages scared. I think you saw that last year at times with the catcher situation with Pedro Paez, where they wouldn't want to pinch hit for him because then we have to burn our second catcher off the bench. Well, okay, but you need to win the ball game.
Yep.
And I think that's what happened last night. Sure, having Donovan, if you get to the 11th inning at shortstop, that's not ideal. They clearly want Masyn Winn to start as many games as possible, and they didn't even bring a backup shortstop. But I look at that and I go, man, I'll worry about that inning when I get there. I got to get there first. And I thought last night going with Masyn Winn, who not only has been bad in the regular season, has also been bad in the spring training. Let's not act like he had a great spring and all of a sudden he's not hitting. He hasn't hit point blank and period since this season has started. To me, that's when you've got to go to Nolan Gorman.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line. Last thing on this before we get to questions and answers on the other side. Hadn't he just hit for Walker with Burley as well, or was Walker already out of the game? He did do that. It was a decision that he had made in that inning as well.
I was a little surprised by that, but it worked.
I thought it was smart. I thought it was the right move for him in that spot because you're going up against a righty. So yeah, makes sense to go to that player there. Also, he was a guy, Johnson was, with a big-time slider. So just in terms of the way that those guys win, it made sense for Burleson to hit for Walker in that spot, and it worked. So then in the final lap out of the game, they decided to go to Winn. I think part of that is Winn has a better track record over the last year than Jordan Walker. Part of it is they just trust Masyn Winn, and part of it might be like, hey, they think Winn is closer to breaking out than Jordan Walker. I don't know, but for many of those reasons, that's why they went with Masyn Winn. I would have sided with you guys. I would have gone to Nolan Gorman in that final at-bat, and because you need an extra base hit there. Because you've got a guy on first, you need to score him. The best way to do so is with an extra base hit. The best guy on your roster, maybe, to get that extra base hit in that spot is Nolan Gorman. He might also strike out, and guess what? Masyn Winn did too. Coming up next, questions and answers here on BK and Ferrario. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for questions and answers. If you guys have any questions, get them in over there or on the YouTube chat at youtube.com/101ESPN-STL. From the 636, guys, yesterday the Fast Lane, said that T-Bone would be the first to knock BK out should he BKO the Blues. Can we get a response?
Sure. I'm always pro St. Louis.
They think T-Bone would be the first one to knock you out if you BKO'd the Blues?
I don't think I understand.
I would
They're saying
knock you silly with a good old right hook.
I mean,
okay,
I think it would be Jamie
just
Rivers.
said knock you silly.
I think it'd be Alex on our show before me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's a little disrespectful that you're not bringing me into this conversation.
Also, I did the opposite. I said that the season was over when Colton Parayko got hurt. So this is congratulations, St. Louis. I'm also the reason why this is working right now.
Yeah, but you also did injure Colton Parayko. So.
Yes, that is true.
Ipso facto, you almost ruined their season.
Almost, but didn't. 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line from the 314. Guys, wouldn't all of the decisions that Ollie made last night be moot if Donovan simply takes the out at first, had no chance at home, just terrible baseball basics? Yeah, potentially. I think you put yourself into a position to where that mattered, but yeah, that was the biggest moment of the game, was Brendan Donovan making a very uncharacteristic decision for him where 99 times out of 100, Donnie makes the right baseball play. In that moment, though, he made the wrong one. Yeah. It happens.
And those lapses are going to happen. And I'm not going to get overly frustrated in one game when something like that takes place. When it becomes a trend, that's when it's a problem.
Yeah, I think everything that happened then in the game probably goes as it did. And what I mean by that is then it's not even a conversation of do you pinch it for Masyn Winn. And the reason I say that is because at that point, game would have already been tied. If you only allow the one run, they end up tying the game at that point when Winn's bat comes up. And then Ollie's thing they said post-game of, hey, we don't want to lose our shortstop for the next inning. Like, that's a legitimate argument at that case because you've got a chance to win the ball game, but you also know that the outcome is possible that you don't, and you have your best shortstop in the game for the 11th inning.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line from the 314. Guys, do you think that we will see a single game this year where Dvorsky and Snuggerud are in the lineup together?
Ooh.
Yes. Yeah,
Utah?
I think you will. Maybe. Could be Seattle on the road. But once the playoffs are solidified, I can see a couple of guys getting rest. I can see Sundqvist getting the game off. I can see a guy, even, Bolduc, man. No, you're not going to take Bolduc out of the lineup. Maybe a Dylan Holloway. Just the guys who have played a lot of hockey who are banged up. Buchnevich probably could get a game.
Sonny.
Yeah, Sonny, absolutely. When you lock up the playoff spot and you're not as determined that you have to pick up 2 points, that's when I could see both of them play. The real question, though, is do they send Dvorsky down to the AHL to continue to play playoffs? But the fact that he's here now kind of tells you where they're at.
I would say probably not on that one. My one fear on what you're talking about there, Alex, once you take your foot off of the gas for any period of time, I do wonder if it's hard to put it back down. Where right now, every game feels so important. And the moment that you just take a little bit of a breath, then you try to get yourself going again for playoff hockey. And I know this is not like the NFL where you're resting 18 starters or something crazy, right? You rest maybe 1 or 2 in the NHL. And so I don't think it's the end of the world, but I do think that would be symbolic to the rest of the team. Hey, this game not all that important. We're going to rest a couple of dudes because of its lack of importance. I wonder if they say, you know what, we've been playing playoff hockey since mid-February. We're going to continue to do so all the way throughout the regular season, and then we'll keep it going once we get to the playoffs.
Yeah, well, and they're in a luxury spot to where they have that ability for the rest of the season because they're going to be chasing Minnesota. Minnesota's still going to be chasing them. So every game is still going to mean something, even when they clinch a playoff spot. So, it's a slippery slope, but I do think this team's got the correct mindset that even if you pluck a guy out to get him some rest and put a Dvorsky or a Snuggerud in, I think they still play competitive and they still have the structure in place.
Jeremy Rutherford joins us coming up in about 15 minutes. But next, Cardinals fans, you made your voices heard last night. Is there anything that the team can do to change your opinion, to change your spending habits when it comes to going to the Cardinals games the rest of the year? We'll talk about that coming up next here on BK and Ferrario.
More on the 101 mobile app. 101 ESPN podcasts are presented by the Schaefer Door Company. WXOS HD1 East St. Louis 101 ESPN is driven by Brown and Crouppen Law Firm. They are St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Fans are making their voices heard in more ways than one, but last night it was loud and clear. Benjamin Hochman sent out a picture right as the teams were taking the field at Busch Stadium last night, and the stadium is damn near empty. Now, it was cold last night. It is still the school year, and I don't blame anybody. I want to make this very clear at the beginning of the segment so it doesn't sound as if I'm shouting at fans. I promise you I'm not. I don't blame anybody for not going to these games. You get to choose how you want to spend your money. So now that we have that disclaimer out here, we can now discuss the issue at hand. This is a transition year, and typically attendance is a lagging indicator. So last year, the team was lousy. The year before that, the team was lousy. You continue to see attendance go down as that takes place, but it typically is a year behind. So if the team were, for example, to be really, really good this year, if they suddenly won 100 games, I'm not sure I would see that represented in attendance right now. I would very likely see that more represented in attendance in 2026, even if next year the team isn't as good as it was this year. That's just the way that, generally speaking, at least, this stuff works. Last night, there were 21,206 in terms of the announced attendance. That is the smallest crowd in a non-COVID season in the history of the stadium.
Wow.
Alex, my question to you is, and it kind of does go back to what I had said previously, do you think there's anything this team can do in 2025 that gets fans re-energized, gets them back to the stadium, and gets them feeling optimistic about the Cardinals instead of what I think is typically the prevailing thought among most fans, which is, when's the other shoe going to drop?
Yeah.
Because that seems to be the way that a lot of fans are viewing it right now. Do you think there's anything this team, realistically speaking, could do this year to change that?
Yes, and I think it's belief. I think it's belief that they've actually got a core in place that can start winning. I mean, we're seeing it play out right now with the Blues, guys. The question to your answer. Now, there's a caveat that I'll get to momentarily, but the seats were pretty, I mean, they weren't empty like Busch Stadium was. It wasn't a historic record, but Enterprise Center in December and January, it wasn't crowded. Like, there were people here, but it wasn't like it typically is. Now, you fast forward to the Four Nations break where they've won 9 in a row, and now, I mean, it's going to be a sold-out crowd again here tonight. And I don't think that's just because they've won 9 in a row. I think that's because people are actually believing this team has built a core, they've figured it out, and they've established a winning culture. That's where I think it's going to come down to, can anything fix this Cardinal season for that? Yeah. If they continue to find ways to win baseball games, win series, and stay at the NL Central top and look like a group of players that actually can make some damage, that's when you start to see people start to file in. My caveat with all of this, though, guys, is John Mozeliak and Ali Marmol. Because I think there's a large bulk of fans that dislike Mo strongly and dislike Ali Marmol strongly. And that's their way of saying, nope, not going to go until those guys are gone.
I would add one other group to that list, which is the DeWitts.
Well, that, unfortunately, then it's never going to get fixed.
Yeah, I think the DeWitts are so, and I don't say this personally. I'm speaking hopefully on behalf of the fan base that doesn't want me to speak on behalf of them, but here we are. I think that it is the biggest stakeholders within the organization are the people that you hear from most often, and those are the people that the fan base has seemingly turned on in recent seasons. We did get this from the text line. I just want to address it real quick from the 618. Guys, there's absolutely no bleeping way that there were 21,000 people at the game last night. They could have had to count everybody twice, and they still wouldn't get to 21,000. It's tickets sold. Anytime you see that attendance number, whether it's from the team, whatever, that is the number of tickets that they had sold. That was the case 5 years ago when they were announcing sellouts, when you would look at the game and you could see there were empty sections on the upper level. And it is the case today where you can look at the stadium and see there are not just empty sections, there are empty, like, levels of the stadium at the game last night. So, yeah, totally, there were not 21,000 people in attendance last night. I'm in full agreement with that, but that's the way that they count it. I'm with you, Alex. I do think there is hope that you could have in this team this year, but I don't think that's going to be represented by the attendance. This is going to become more and more the norm. Now, maybe you don't see many other games where it's 21,000. Maybe it kind of settles in at 25 to 30 for most games this year. But I think that the team knew this was coming, man. They did. Otherwise, like, they don't say some of the things that they did in the offseason. Like, they've got the idea of, okay, here's what our season tickets look like. Here is how individual tickets are selling right now, and they can compare that to previous seasons. You don't have to be a genius to see that there probably were a lot of people that did not renew their season tickets this year, and I'm guessing that played into, we got to cut some payroll, man. There are other teams that maybe could deal with this. We are not among them. We've got uncertainty with our TV deal right now, and nobody's buying tickets. So when you combine those two things, we got a lack of revenue coming in right now, which means we got to cut some of our expenses, man.
I think pre-All-Star break, nothing's going to fix it. Winning, they could go undefeated the rest of the way. Pre-All-Star break, I don't think anything's going to fix it. Post-All-Star break, if you're a team that's in first place and you're winning, people love playoff baseball in St. Louis. You can say you hate the DeWitts and John Mozeliak all you want, but if the Cardinals are in a playoff spot and they're chasing down the playoffs, I personally believe people are going to show up to Busch Stadium because they haven't had it for, 3 years? Like, again, think of the Blues. Like, people haven't had playoff hockey in St. Louis for 3 years, and this is the first taste of it, and everybody is back on board. You're absolutely right, BK, in terms of the ownership, because a lot of the reason Blues fans stay dedicated is because of how great Tom Stillman and his group are. But I believe people are diehard Cardinals fans through and through. And when that team is in a playoff spot and playoff baseball actually is in the air, that's when people start to file back to Busch Stadium, but only if they're in a position, and I don't think it's going to happen pre-All-Star break.
See, and to an extent, I disagree with that. I think it can't just be, hey, look, we're in the playoff picture right now. You got to believe in them being a team that can win in the playoffs. Maybe not win at all, but you got to be able to look at them and go, hey, I can see the path to where they get to the NLCS, for example. I can see how they do it because, I mean, we've referenced the 2019 team because they got to the NLCS, but they got destroyed, and nobody ever really believed in that team. I don't think it's just going to be, oh, okay, they're first place in the NL Central. It's time to go to the ballpark, baby. We are back. It's got to be, hey, they're on a burner right now. They're playing really good baseball. I can see how they can win a playoff series. I think that's how you start to see any kind of trickle-down effect of maybe then we start to sell out. But I think it's such an uphill battle. I doubt that they do such – I doubt they make any inroads this year.
The truth is they have to get back to a World Series to get back to the attendance that they were previously. Like, you look at when was the last time that you saw attendance numbers like this? It was the early 2000s. And what happened that changed it? They went to multiple World Series. They went to one in 04, 06, 11, 13. They had teams that were not just playing quality baseball. They were teams that were playing deep into October. And this is a fan base that, historically speaking, responds to that. That, and frankly, only that. Like, you can have fun players, and like Mark McGwire brought people back to the stadium, but that was as much a baseball story as it was a specific to St. Louis story. Hell, it was a societal story. Like, that was one of the biggest things going in pop culture at the time. But when you look at what brings, historically speaking, fans to the stands here in St. Louis, how do you get back to the 40,000 a night? There's only one way that it has happened, and the further you get away from it, the less that ends up continuing to have that same effect. It's getting back to a World Series. And until that happens, it's not about do you think they can, it's did they? Did they do it? Did they accomplish what they did in 2013, 2011, 2006, so on? Until that happens, man, this is probably going to become more and more the norm here in St. Louis. And I'm fascinated to see how that plays into some of the team's decision-making processes, because it can be this self-fulfilling prophecy where your attendance is low, so your payroll drops, which means the team's not as good, and you have less of an opportunity to win in October, especially as you're seeing the Mets, the Phillies, the Braves, the Dodgers spending all of this money to go deep into October. How does this end up getting out of the cycle? Or are you just on this hamster wheel of mediocrity and you get stuck in it? It's something that I think it's going to be a story for the next 5 to 10 years.
And this is why, real quick, it was super smart of them to finally admit it's time to hit the player development and really take an overlook at that.
I don't think they had a choice.
Well, I don't think they had a choice, but it was really smart to make sure that you went in there and did that. Because if you don't develop players like you're talking about of, hey, we're cutting payroll because fans aren't coming out, you create that self-fulfilling prophecy unless you develop guys. If you can get cost control, you can then build a winner with less payroll, and then hopefully you can propel yourself out of it.
Yeah, but if you're in the mindset of they've got to be like a World Series contender to get people back to that stage, you can't do that just through player development.
Correct.
You're going to have to go out there and spend money or make a trade for a star, and it's one thing I don't trust them to do.
You have to do both. You have to do what you did. Like the early 2000s, dude, that is the formula for this team to continue to get back into legitimate contention. You developed stars on your own, and then you traded and or acquired others from the outside. Like that's it. It sounds super easy, but it is a ridiculously hard thing to do. Otherwise, everybody in baseball would be doing it. All right, coming up in 15 minutes, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Bet It or Forget It. But next, Jeremy Rutherford joins us, talk about the Blues heading into tonight's game, and what does he expect from Jimmy Snuggerud in his debut. JR joins us next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, alongside Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Tonight is the debut for Jimmy Snuggerud in a Blues uniform. Alex Ferrario will be on the call. He's broadcasting live right now at Enterprise Center, where the Blues will be taking on the Red Wings tonight, and that is where Jeremy Rutherford will be taking this game in. Blues insider for The Athletic, and he joins us, as always, via the Callier and Thompson hotline. JR, appreciate the time, as always, man. What are you most looking forward to about Jimmy Snuggerud's debut tonight?
Oh, this is going to be great watching Jimmy Snuggerud after writing, about 300 articles about him in the past couple of years. And so finally to be able to see him out on the ice wearing number 21. I'm sure you guys have talked about it. His number at Minnesota was 81. Dylan Holloway has that. Yesterday, Jimmy Snuggerud told us that he only cares about what's on the front of the sweater. If you haven't been a Blues fan for a long time, that's the number one thing that you say when you're asked about your jersey is you only care about the front. And so that seemed to gain some popularity for Jimmy Snuggerud with the fans. But what am I looking forward to the most? The most is this. In the years of covering the Blues, anytime a young player comes up and he can shoot the puck, the question that's going to come up at the press conference is, will he defer or will he actually shoot the puck? Because a lot of the young players like to defer. And somebody asked Jim Montgomery that question today, and he said he's been told. So let's see if the youngster, 20 years old, will actually let go of the puck tonight and rip a few shots when he gets the puck.
JR, you've been doing this long enough to see a lot of guys debuts.
Hey now.
I know. Sorry. It's the hair, man. When the hair goes, you just know you're a grizzled vet. But when we're talking about a guy like Jimmy Snuggerud, who is as highly touted of a prospect as I can remember, what should the expectations be for fans?
Well, I think they should be pretty high because he's a first-round pick, and he's a guy who's a Hobie Baker finalist as college hockey's MVP. We'll find that out April 11th here in St. Louis when the Frozen Four comes to St. Louis. So he's got a great pedigree, and we know that his dad and his grandpa also played at the University of Minnesota. He's got the skill. He's got the talent. We've seen that the past couple of years with the Gophers. But with all that said, you're playing your first game in the NHL. The team's got a 9-game winning streak. You don't want to be a guy to mess it up. I mean, that's a lot of pressure on a guy, and especially when you have a coach like Jim Montgomery telling you to go in and shoot the puck. Be you. Do what you do best. So I can never imagine, I can never put myself in the shoes of a guy like a Jimmy Snuggerud or a Dalibor Dvorsky who've been waiting for this their entire life, and now they're out on the ice, and especially with the circumstances of how well the Blues have been playing, the team chemistry. So, I think he's going to go out there and perform. And, whether his first goal comes tonight or it comes next week, he's a guy who's going to help this team for many years to come.
JR, what do you think the development plan looks like with Snuggerud? Because it's been different for everybody, right? Guys come in and they're at different places in their respective careers. Zach Bolduc earlier this year was basically play a couple of games, take a night off. Play a couple, take a night off. And then eventually he became an every night mainstay. For Dvorsky, it was play one game and then sit up in the press box for a couple of weeks. What do you think this is going to look like for Jimmy Snuggerud?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I would look at those different examples and say there's different circumstances. Like with Zach Bolduc, it was at the beginning of the year. Does he make the team? How long does he stay? Does he play well enough to stay? And he's really grown and blossomed. And, I maintain that he's played well because, they were a little hard on him and sat him a few times and worked with him in practices. And now he's developed into the player that he has. And then with Dalibor Dvorsky, they liked his game. It's just a situation where, okay, let's take a step back, and we got some other guys who've been playing well too, and we're going to keep them in there. And again, Jim Montgomery said the other day that with Dvorsky, they felt like he played well, so he could have stayed in, and it was a hard decision to take him out. With Snuggerud, to me, 7-8 games left to go in the season. Get him in there, see how he looks. If he wows you and he pumps 2 in tonight, and every time he gets a look at the net, he's putting it on net, 7 shots on goal, keep him in there. I think that Jim Montgomery said it best. They're adding a really good talent to this roster. They want to see what he can do. And if he looks a little behind the pace and he's not taking those shots, then maybe like Dvorsky, take a step back. But this team is gearing up for playoff mode. They have been. And so I think it's just a little bit of a different situation with so few games left to go in the regular season.
I know it's a question that you don't know the answer to, JR, but like a hypothetical one here because you have been covering the team for so long. when you make a decision like this, when you take a guy out of the lineup to where they've had the same lineup with the exception of Dvorsky going in for Sundqvist since the Four Nations break, do you think that impacts the rest of the players?
Yes and no. I think it probably privately affects the players who come out of the lineup. In this case, say Matthew Joseph. Texier has played well in his last couple games when he was in there. So, I'm sure those guys go home for lunch, sit in their house and, they're bummed out. But I think big picture, and we talked to Braden Shen about this yesterday, I think what's made this team successful for the past month or so is they've looked at it like we instead of me. And there's no way to play the way they have together, blocking shots, doing the things, the sacrifices, and winning so many games in a row without having that mentality. So Jim Montgomery said yesterday, Alex, you heard it. He said, we've talked to those people who are involved in situations that are affected by Jimmy Snuggerud being here. Most importantly, we've talked to the leaders. And, like Shen said yesterday, the last thing we're worried about is Jimmy Snuggerud coming in and disrupting things. So, I don't want to be naive and think that there's probably not some players behind the scenes who are disappointed, but this team realizes that it's got a lot to play for here.
Jeremy Rutherford is our guest. He joins us each and every Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario. You can read his great work over at The Athletic, and be sure to follow him on Twitter at JP Rutherford. JR, final question that I've got for you today. When you look at where the Blues are at in the playoff standings, they're right there with the Minnesota Wild. 1 point back at this point. No games in hand to have to worry about there. Do you think it matters who their first-round opponent is? Like, does that change at all or sway at all how you're going to feel about them in the first round, or is it just about the Blues at this point? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it truly matters, and I know that's convenient to say, but I really do think with the way they're playing and the fact that a month ago you didn't think the playoffs were going to be a possibility, hey, just go play. Like, whoever they tell you the opponent is, go to Winnipeg, go to Vegas, go wherever. So from that aspect, I think the Blues are looking at just like they have these last 9 or so games, is they feel like they're capable of winning and beating any of the two opponents that I just mentioned. If you probably had your pick, I think Vegas is a tough team. I think that'd be a tough draw, even though you're thrilled to be in the playoffs. Winnipeg's not going to be any easier. Don't get me wrong. You got an outstanding goalie and Connor Hellebuck and a team that's number one in the league and been so most of the year. I just think there's going to be a ton of pressure on Winnipeg. I think the Blues have played them well, and I think this team, do I look nervous, Jordan Binnington, going into that building and playing a first-round playoff series? They would not be, I don't think, the least bit turned off by the fact that would be a tough assignment.
JR, Alex is going to be there broadcasting the game tonight. I'm going to be in attendance in the media. You're going to be up there as well. I expect something weird to happen tonight. Just fully anticipate. There's going to be some kind of a story. T-Bone knows this. Anytime that I go to a Cardinals game, it's a guaranteed weird night at the stadium. That will absolutely be the case for the Blues versus the Red Wings tonight. So be prepared.
A little BKO, huh?
I didn't even think about that, man. You can't come tonight, BK. I can't be the guy that ruins a 9-game win streak. I can't do that, and it's going to be because of you.
You can't put this on me. JR, appreciate the time as always, man.
Yeah, I will say this. Usually I try to start writing a story in the first or second period, but if we don't know what's going to happen tonight, we don't know when that's going to come, I guess I'll just wait to the third period to figure out what I'm writing.
I wouldn't start preparing that story until the final whistle is blown. JR, appreciate the time. We'll talk with you tonight, my man.
All right, see you guys.
You got it. It's Jeremy Rutherford joining us as he does each and every Tuesday here on BK and Ferrario.
You can't come tonight, man. You can't.
I got to see you up in your element. If you're going to be on the call for Jimmy Snuggerud's debut, I feel like I need to be there in support of my guy who's getting the opportunity.
I can't even fathom the idea. I already told Curbs when he told me that I was going to take this game on. I'm like, dude, I really appreciate it, but are you kidding me? You're going to give me a 9-game win streak game to take the play-by-play on? Talk about have a city hate you when they lose.
He knew what he was doing. Mahomes,
and it's going to be your fault.
What did you say?
I said it's going to be your fault.
I don't think that's what you said the first time.
I said it's going to be your fault. Sorry, Andrew Marsh did text and said he's going to be at the game in the stand, so he offsets BK.
See, there we go.
No, okay. Marshy, nothing offsets BK. You know that.
Mahomes Longbody said, so you're saying that I need to get on a goalie goal prop bet tonight?
Oh, 100%.
Now that would be fun.
Maybe that, maybe a goalie fight.
You can see to be fair, I don't think I've ever seen anything random happen that's fun when I've been with you at a Cardinals game. It's
Man,
typically
that's
something
fair.
bad.
One that always comes to mind for me, that Mets game, this was a few years ago now,
Gio didn't cover
where
the bag.
Gio forgot to cover the bag.
Yeah.
That was an all-time letdown. The Giants game that we went to, that was fun. The Cardinals just absolutely shell-shocked the
Pujols
Giants. I think
pitched.
it was Carlos Rodon, who was the starter in that game for the Giants at the time, and they beat him like 15-3 or something.
That was the game Albert pitched, I'm pretty sure.
My expectation is like the ice is going to melt and they're going to have to delay puck drop because BK is in the building.
Well,
That
the thing
fits.
that you need is for me to be late for some reason, or for me
well,
to
that'll
not show
happen.
up for whatever reason. Because if I'm late, it probably, like Albert hits all of his home runs when I'm late to games, or when I'm not in attendance, 700th when I was in LA. You guys have heard that story at this point. So tonight, that's really what you need, Alex, is for me to be running a little bit behind. The last game that I went to this year was the Boston Bruins game with the St. Louis Blues. And as you know, that one was super weird.
BK, this is actually...
Too?
I was a little late to that one, yeah.
BK, this one is actually just for you. I just got an alert from the Blues. Just for you, buddy. The game doesn't start till 11 o'clock.
There you go. All right, well, I will be there at 6:30. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Coming up next, time for Bet It or Forget It here on 101 ESPN.
Tanner Hendrickson here, the Sports Center update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night, the Cardinals dropped Game 1 of their 3-game set to the Angels, 5-4 in extra innings. They will be back in action tonight. 6:45 will be first pitch. Kyle Hendricks on the mound for L.A. Matthew Liberatore will get the start for the Cardinals. And tonight here on 101 ESPN, you can hear Blues versus Red Wings. We'll have pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario. Then Alex and Joey will have puck drop for you at 7. The Sports Update is driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. See them at Londoff.com. Chevy, together we drive. Are you kidding me?
Make the call. It's BK and Ferrario's Bet It or Forget It on 101 ESPN.
Presented by Circus Sports Illinois. Sports betting the way it should be.
Was it delayed?
No, it was him.
Oh, he jumped in? Oh,
Yeah.
see, I wasn't sure if I was delayed since I'm on the air link, but I wasn't.
I assumed you weren't going to do it. This is on me. We should have communicated during the break. I assumed you weren't going to do it because most of the time when we are on remote, you don't do it. And so I made a bad assumption. You had the perfect timing, and then I tried to undermine everything you were trying to accomplish. That's on me, not on you.
Yeah. Well,
I take full responsibility.
You are correct though. No, see, we're going to be good friends right now on this segment because you are correct. I typically don't do it. I think the excitement of tonight just took over my body, and that's what happened.
All right, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service text line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on BK and Ferrario. But we'll start with our situations here. Bet it or forget it, boys. The Cardinals' starting catcher in 2026 is not currently on the big league roster.
Bet it. I think it's one of these minor league guys. The hard part is I don't know if they're going to be ready for that role. So if it's not, then I wonder if it's going to be an outside person. So I'm going to say bet it.
See, I'm going to forget it because I'm kind of with you. I wonder if Jimmy Crooks is the guy. I don't know if he'll be ready for that responsibility yet of being an everyday starting catcher at the big leagues. I think it's Paz. I think Paz is your starting catcher 2026. I think he's possibly your starting catcher in 2 months. But I'm going to forget this. I don't think they're going to go external for that.
I'm going to bet it as well. I don't think that he is currently on the major league roster. I think he's either in the minor leagues or on another roster in the major leagues right now, and they will either sign or trade for that guy. Don't know who it's going to be, but man, I just don't know that this team, given their sensibilities, will be okay with not having a plus defender behind the plate. I mean, clearly they weren't okay with it with Wilson Contreras, and Ivan Herrera is notably worse defensively than Wilson Contreras. So I'm going to say bet it. I think he's on another team right now, either in the Cardinals minor league system or in Major League Baseball. Alex, what do you got for us today?
Guys, bet it or forget it. We see this Blues team break the franchise record for most consecutive wins.
What was the record? What was it back in 2000?
It was 11. So they're 3 away from breaking it. 2 would tie it.
Forget it. BK's in attendance tonight. They're losing. God. It's just going to happen.
I'm going to do this for all of you. Forget it. They will not break the record.
You don't believe that.
You don't believe it, and that BK doesn't work. God, I hate you.
Alex?
I'm betting it because I think even the BKO can't stop this train right now.
You'll be on the call for the next 2 games, right, Alex?
Yeah, so potential to have the 11-game win streak and then let the voice of the Blues, Chris Kerber, call the franchise record on Saturday against Colorado.
Can I ask a quick follow-up on this before we get to T-Bone's Bet It or Forget It?
Sure. Yeah, please.
I am curious your mindset going into this. For your final call, Curbs has a staple. It's bring out the Zamboni, and then he goes into his finale. Are you going to take Curbs' final call and make it into your own? Or do you have something that you will go with for the game tonight that you've already scripted out? How do you go into tonight's game thinking about what that final call looks like for you?
So it's a really good question. I when I first did play-by-play 2019 when I took over for Curbs, I was like, I'll just bring out the Zamboni because I don't want it to change consistency for Blues fans. But then I don't want to steal Curbs' thing. That's Curbs' thing, and I don't want to take that, just like I don't want to take that's a winner or anything. So for me, because I am a fan of the Blues on top of doing the pre and post and covering the team, I've always told myself I'm going to keep it natural. I couldn't even tell you what my final call was in 2019 when I filled in for Curbs. So I don't want to prepare it because I think when you prepare it, it comes out very unnatural and lame. And so I'm just going to kind of see what the emotions are in this one. And if it's an exciting finish, I think my excitement is going to take over and give that final call. So it's kind of like a remain to be seen, be surprised at what the final call is.
You're not going to have to worry about the Zamboni call when they lose tonight. Just got it out there. Maybe it's the final call. Blues winning streak snap because Brandon Kiley in attendance tonight. At BK Sports Talk. Let your anger out on Twitter.
That will be the final call if they lose.
By the way, we've had back-to-back questions real quick, Alex. From the 618. Is Alex in studio? No, he's at Enterprise Center. He will be on the call tonight for the Blues game. So he went out there today for morning skate. He's out. That's why he's not in studio with us today. Next one is is Alex on the TV broadcast? No, he'll be on the radio call right here on 101 ESPN. From the 618, guys, why is Curbs not on the call? He had a medical procedure. Alex is going to do the next couple of games. We're hoping that Curbs is back as soon as possible, but Alex is going to be filling in for Curbs the next couple of games on the radio side of the broadcast. All right, there we go.
I can promise you the final call, if they lose, which I don't expect them to, but if they lose, will be, and the Blues lose, the win streak is snapped thanks to Brandon Kiley, who is in attendance tonight.
Shame on you,
There's your final call.
Can't believe you go when this is at stake.
Stay at home, man.
I was just curious. I didn't know what your mentality was on that, Alex. So thanks
I've always had that thought process to where it's like I never want to script it because I think that sounds lame. You can tell when broadcasters script a final call or a big call, and I don't want to do that. I'll let the emotions take over because look, if they can win, my emotions are going to be at an all-time high because it's a 10-game win streak. So,
T-Bone?
Guys, bet it or forget it. Kyle Hendricks shoves tonight, and the Cardinals end up dropping that minimum 2 or 3 to the Angels.
Bet it. You know that's going to happen.
There are 2 huge forces going up against one another tonight. One, Kyle Hendricks, who in his career against the Cardinals, as we all know, becomes Cy Young. 2, Brant Brown, who has yet to have a Cardinals game as the hitting coach in which they did not produce at least 10 hits. Every game so far, all 4 games, they have had at least 10 hits. They reached base more than 15 times yesterday. They just didn't have the sequencing right to where they could have scored, 6+ runs. So this is going to be the real moment where we find out just how strong is the Brant Brown aura. And I'll say forget it. I think Brant Brown comes through. I think the Cardinals lineup ends up finding a way to get to Kyle Hendricks tonight. I did find it interesting just a little bit ago. Ollie Marmol was on with another podcast and said Von Herrera will not be in the lineup tonight. They're working with him on potentially throwing from his knees. So we'll see if that works to where he can.
Yeah, okay.
He can be a better catcher behind the plate.
Yeah, that's only harder, but okay.
Yeah, that'll
help Noodle Arm.
Yeah,
we're working with them on something that you should probably already have as a gift if you're a catcher.
So there you go.
Good stuff.
314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line for Bet It or Forget It. You guys give us a scenario. We will tell you if we are betting it or forgetting it here on 101 ESPN. All right, from the 314, guys, bet it or forget it. BK will cause a riot if he ends the Blues winning streak tonight.
No, there won't be a riot. He will have at least two tires that are slashed wherever he parks.
I'm not telling anybody where I'm going to be parking tonight.
Don't worry, I'm fine. I already got low jack on your car, man. I know where you're at.
Boy, I just imagine BK rolling up in an Uber now, and then the Uber won't pick him up after they realize what happened.
He's going to show up with a hat and some sunglasses on. Yeah. It's going to be 6 o'clock. Yeah.
So, I need somebody.
You gonna shave your beard before you go?
I need somebody to put BK's face on like a wanted poster, like Most Wanted, like those old school westerns, and then it could be wanted for jinxing everything that we like in St. Louis. That's great. What we need to post. And then when they lose, because BK screws up everything, we all post that on social media, so BK can't go anywhere.
All right, bet it or forget it, guys. The Flames make the playoffs along with the Blues, and the Wild are the odd team out.
I'm forgetting that one. Calgary has they've got 4 or 5 games to where they take on Vegas, Edmonton, Dallas, Colorado down the stretch. Minnesota's going to get Kaprizov and Eriksson Ek back. So they'll find a way to at least, look, they got a point last night. New Jersey ished the bed once again like they typically do, Minnesota's going to find a way to keep picking up points. The problem for Calgary is, like, you cannot lose a hockey game, and I don't expect them to go undefeated the rest of the way.
Yeah, I would forget this. I think you're going to see the Wild be the one that get in along with the Blues because Alex said it perfectly. Look, they got to play perfect hockey. Like if you even just assume they win their 2 games in hand on the Wild, they still end up being 2 points back of them. So you almost have to play perfect the rest of the way.
Alex is right. They do have a relatively difficult schedule the rest of the way. They've got Vegas a couple of times. They also have a head-to-head against Minnesota. And they have 4 games head-to-head against Anaheim and San Jose. 2 against Anaheim, 2 against San Jose the rest of the way. If there are any teams that you would want to play down the stretch, those are the teams because they're going to be tanking like crazy, dude. So I'll say bet it. Give me Calgary and St. Louis to be the 2 teams that end up making it to the postseason as the wild cards in the Western Conference. Let's go for it. See what that looks like in the postseason.
Yeah, let's go for it, man. That always works out well for you.
I kind of like what Calgary's done here, by the way. They're in a similar spot to the Blues. They didn't go quite as hard on it as the Blues did in the offseason with the offer sheets and whatnot, but they're just making the best of what is obviously a rough situation there where they're tied to so many of these veterans. And I respect the fact that they didn't just try to tear this thing down to the studs and break everything up. They said, hey, let's see if this can be a little better than people are expecting.
Yeah, I think Craig Conroy is one of the best GMs, and he's only been a GM for a couple of years, but he's just one of those guys that he screams Billy Guerin to me, that just has confidence in his players. And I mean, that was a really crappy situation that they were in with Goudreau leaving and then Matthew Tkachuk and then Jonathan Huberdeau. They basically banked on Huberdeau having a rebound year and Nazem Kadri having a rebound year. They've got good players, young players. Their problem is going to be bringing free agents to their team. But he's aggressive in the trade market, so I could see Calgary staying competitive.
Last one. Let's get a quick thought on this. Guys, bet it or forget it. Newt will be an all-star this year for the Cardinals.
Bet it.
Forget it. I think he'll stay healthy.
Jeez, man. I'm going to bet it. Newt's biggest issue this year, or in his past, has been his inability to start off the season hot, and he looks great right now, man. He looks completely locked in at the plate so far, so I'll go ahead and bet it. Yeah, he'd be position player-wise the guy that I think is maybe most likely to get into the All-Star game this year for the Cardinals.
I got one more for you guys. Bet it or forget it. I should make a Snuggie pun on the broadcast tonight.
Forget
it.
Cool. Me too.
All right. Coming up next, 314-399-9646 is the Air Comfort Service X line to get involved in the show. We're going to dive into the junk drawer here on BK and Ferrario.
Open it up. The Junk Drawer with BK and Ferrario.
I'm BK. It's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. Let's dive into the junk drawer. And Alex, I'd like to explore what today is like for you.
Okay.
Because as a broadcaster from the city of St. Louis who grew up as a Blues fan that wanted to go to that Blues game, and then you ended up, your sister went, she got the bike, It became a whole thing in your family. You are about to broadcast tonight the Blues versus the Red Wings, which is a rivalry that certainly dates back to your childhood here in St. Louis. The Blues are in the midst of a historic run right now. Jimmy Snuggerud is making his NHL debut. Jim Montgomery is the head coach. You got to see him here previously as an assistant. Like, all of this coming in, and you get to broadcast the game tonight. What is going through your mind? It is 12:57 right now, and 6 hours from now, you're going to be getting prepared for what is a really incredible opportunity for you as somebody that is from this town and loves this team. What is this experience like for you today, man?
I mean, it's everything, like I mean, first of all, my thought process is, man, I have so much more prep that I probably need to do. So that's the other mindset, but you can never get ahead of that. I mean, it's everything to me. One, the fact that Curbs has enough faith in me to handle these duties says an awful lot about him as an individual, because, the last time I've done like real play-by-play is in college. And now I always kind of try and perfect the craft at home, like peek behind the curtain when I find out, because I've done a couple of these since the Blues have come to 101 ESPN. And so every time Curbs asks me fine-tuning it is going home and turning on NHL 25 and picking the two teams, putting it on simulation, and then broadcasting it in my basement. So that's like how I prep for games. I mean, this was my dream, being a play-by-play guy growing up. Like, my dad got me into hockey when I was young. I was terrible at it. I couldn't ice skate, but I always loved the game. I watched it as an avid fan. My dad and I have always had that relationship with it, and I think that's the coolest part, BK, when you ask me, like, now that I've got 3 girls, knowing that they can listen to Daddy on the radio doing play-by-play. But every time this opportunity comes up, my dad's the first one I call. When Curbs told me that there was a chance I was doing it, I'm like, Dad, I might be doing play-by-play for the Detroit Red Wings. And you have flashbacks of, Cujo and Cheval Day and the playoff series. And it's such a humbling feeling knowing that you get this opportunity to be a part of a broadcast for an NHL team for a kid that went to college that just wanted to do play-by-play. And as most people do, they shift their career agenda, right? Like, I wanted to do play-by-play. Then it was television. Then it was radio, and I got some opportunities to be on air.
And now you're stuck with me.
And now I'm stuck with you. That's probably the worst thing that could have happened. But, play-by-play has always been a goal. It kind of took a back seat for my career because I enjoyed getting to do talk radio and pre- and post games. But yeah, every time this comes up, man, there's just a little part of it's 8-year-old Alex that gets super excited to call hockey games, and being such a big Blues fan, I think that's what makes these opportunities that much more enjoyable.
Well, you're going to be amazing. There's no doubt about that. You're with Joe tonight, right?
Yeah, me and Vitali. So that's when you know it's going to be gold.
It'll be a full Italian broadcast tonight here on 101 right. ESPN. You'll be able to hear that all right here on your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN pregame. How about this? With Alex Ferrario at 6 o'clock. So he's got 11-2 with us. He had the pregame skate earlier today where he went out there, watched the skate, and then got interviews afterwards. And then after this, he'll continue to be at Enterprise Center for the next 4 hours, prepping for his pregame show, which starts at 6 o'clock. He's got puck drop at 7. Intermissions in between will also be hosted by Alex Ferrario. And then just for good measure, we've got the postgame show with Alex Ferrario afterwards. So if you want any Alex Ferrario in your lives, today is the day to do it.
Yep, that's a whole lot of Alex. So for the people that dislike me, I apologize. For the people that like me, buckle up. It's going to be a fun one.
You're going to be great, man. No doubt about it.
Thanks, buddy.
Alex
Appreciate
Ferrario has the call tonight. Red Wings versus the Blues starting at 6, puck drop at 7 right here on 101 ESPN. By the way, Puck Cancer, the second shift charity hockey game, is Friday night at the Centene Community Ice Center. You can tune in Friday afternoon to hear the Fast Lane broadcasting live before the game from 2 to 6 o'clock. That is at the E&B Granite Studios. Tickets on sale right now for the second annual Puck Cancer second shift alumni game. See the St. Louis Blues alumni face off against the Blackhawks alumni, including Jamie Rivers, in a rivalry game in support of Siteman Cancer Center and the V Foundation for Cancer Research. Grab your tickets right now. Game is Friday night. Support those two great organizations and then tune in to pregame this Friday afternoon for the Fast Lane live from the E&B Granite Studios at the Centene Community Ice Center. Coming up next here on BK and Ferrario, does the playoff matchup really matter for the Blues? And Alex has a nugget from practice today. We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN.
Clear.
Alex Ferrario back with you to tell you about my friends out at Rhino Shield. When it comes to the exterior of your home, your business, they are the company for you. And I want to isolate business owners right now and talk to you, because if the exterior of your business, the building that you have all of your employees in, the building that customers are looking at, you want it to look new, you want it to look great, that's where Rhino Shield comes into play. You've got the water damage on the side, the paint chipping off, or maybe it just looks old. That's where Rhino Shield comes into play, because what they use, the product that they use, is not paint. They use a ceramic coating that sticks 8 to 10 times thicker than any paint that you're going to buy. And what that means is it's 100% waterproof. So all the moisture, the rain, the snow that we get throughout the years, it's protected. The sun, when it's 100-something degrees outside and the sun is beating down on your house, the UV rays deflects 90% of those. It's all backed by a 25-year transferable warranty. And there's plenty of businesses around Chesterfield Amphitheater. There's a couple of different buildings around my house. There's a plaza in High Ridge that was done by Rhino Shield. It looks brand new. So give Darren a call today. Have him come out. He'll give you a free estimate. He'll give you his opinion, what he thinks is going to look great. He'll even show you some of the pictures of some of the businesses and homes that he's done, and they look brand new. So give him a call, 877-25-RHINO, 877-25RHINO.com.
St. Louis. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
Alex, a lot of love for you, by the way, in the YouTube chat. YouTube.com/101ESPN STL. We got Tyler saying congrats to Alex. Gator said Alex is a radio warrior. Willie, Alex with the coast-to-coast coverage today. Pretty cool for Alex. That comes from Ryan over there in the YouTube chat as well. So lots of love for Alex Ferrario over in the YouTube chat. All well-deserved. If you missed it, Alex going to be on the call tonight for Red Wings, versus the St. Louis Blues. Pre-game starting at 6, puck drop at 7, right here on 101 ESPN. Alex, this is going to be a game that goes a long way once again in terms of the points for the Blues as we get into this playoff push down the stretch. I thought it was crazy to talk about the Blues compared to the Wild as recently as, 2 weeks ago, maybe even last week. And yet here we are today. They have the same number of games played. Finally, that is no longer a factor. The Blues are 1 point back of the Minnesota Wild for that top wild card spot. The prize of getting it is to play the Vegas Golden Knights. If you end up in the second wild card, you play against the Winnipeg Jets. Alex, do you think it matters which of those two teams the Blues play in the first round of the postseason?
No, I don't. I think let me rephrase that. It matters to me because I think there's a better path to a Western Conference final. But in terms of the Blues, no, absolutely not, because they match up well against both teams, in my opinion. The Winnipeg Jets, I guarantee you, people in Winnipeg are thinking, no bleeping way do we want to take that team on with Jordan Binnington again. They all remember what happened in 2019. There's no way they want that, and that's the team that's going to win the President's Trophy. But I personally think they match up well against Vegas. They typically are tight games against the Vegas Golden Knights. Vegas has Aiden Hill, who I don't believe is the best goaltender in terms of the goalies that are going to be in this playoff push. They've got a very good defense, and they've got a really strong top six. Do not get me wrong. But they don't have the depth that the Blues have, and that's where I think they can pounce on a team like Vegas over Winnipeg, because Winnipeg at least has 4 lines that they can roll. Vegas is top heavy with guys like Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Ivan Barbashev. They've got the better defensive side. But no, I don't think it matters. This team is just right now playing so hot and so good with their structure that any team is going to run into the same fits if they go into a 7-game series with the Blues.
I don't know if it matters in terms of I don't know that the Vegas odds would be all that different either way, right? The Blues are going to be significant underdogs whether they play against Winnipeg or Vegas in the first round of the postseason. That being said, I do think there are matchups that I prefer with Winnipeg. Like, Alex, in your opinion, let me ask it this way. What would you say right now is the biggest weakness for the St. Louis Blues in their game? Like, whether it's 5-on-5 offense, 5-on-5 defense, power play, penalty kill, goaltending, whatever it is, what would you say as of today is the biggest weakness for this team?
I would say penalty kill. That would be my biggest concern. If you were to ask me what's your biggest concern, it's the penalty kill right now.
Would you like me to read off post Four Nations face-off the power play numbers for the Vegas Golden Knights compared to the Winnipeg Jets?
Sure.
The Vegas Golden Knights, since the Four Nations face-off, have a 40% power play. 40%.
Sounds about right.
Tops in the league. The Winnipeg Jets, 17%, one of the worst in the NHL since the Four Nations face-off. Now, it's fun with small sample size. It's entirely possible Winnipeg's like, yeah, we're going to figure this thing out as we go down the stretch, and then into the postseason it ends up being great. But you mentioned that Vegas is very star-heavy. They rely on their top players. Well, where do those guys have a guaranteed opportunity to be on the ice, basically together, and they can use those lethal shots? Well, it's on the power play. So I would anticipate that their power play would be slightly better. So to me, that is one of the things that would swing my vote toward Winnipeg. They can beat either. But for me, if I had a preference of who I would rather play, it sounds weird because they're probably going to win the President's Trophy this year. I would rather play Winnipeg this season.
Yeah, what worries me about Winnipeg is Kyle Connor. Kyle Connor has his way with the Blues. And it's just one of those matchups that I look at and I'm like, man, you know what? I just don't get the same feel with Winnipeg for how they've played against them these last couple of years that I do with Vegas. And then the other one is the goaltender. Like, they're pretty similar numbers, but Jordan Binnington in his career is significantly better against Vegas. Regular season, mind you. Playoffs, we all know what he did.
Different animal, man.
Yeah, it is a different animal, but against Vegas, man, he is 9-4-5, which tells you they're always tight hockey games. He's got a .914 save percentage versus Winnipeg. He's 3-7-1. So it's a great point by you because penalty kill to me is still their weakness, and you're right. Like penalties get called in the playoffs because it gets a lot nastier. You hope that they swallow the whistle a little bit, but typically it doesn't happen that way. I would expect, though, that the Blues, and I feel personally they're a better 5-on-5 team than Vegas, and Winnipeg, I think, is pretty close with them in terms of the 5-on-5 play. And that's a majority of what the hockey game is going to be played. The Blues, typically, when they beat their opponent in this win streak or since the Four Nations break, it's been because they've been the dominant 5-on-5 team.
Yeah, I would lean towards Winnipeg because of what you just said with the power play. Out of curiosity, do you still have those power play numbers up? Where does Edmonton and LA rank? And the reason I ask that is because this is determining your path. If you end up in the Pacific lane, because Edmonton scares the crap out of me because of Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl.
They're the one that's scared
ninth at 26%, and LA is, and this is since the Four Nations face-off, LA is 20th at 21%.
Yeah. Okay, so
Edmonton is the team that scares me the least in terms of a matchup. And I know people would think I'm crazy because I'm saying that with McDavid and Draisaitl. I think they're the team that has the biggest holes going into the playoffs.
Colorado is number 1 in this ranking. They are also at 40.9% since the Four Nations face-off. And Dallas, I believe, is 12th, if I'm not mistaken. I'll have to look that up. But Dallas is Dallas is 5th.
Put 5th. Yeah, and remember, Dallas is the one that put 4 up. That's where I'm concerned, and that's why I said I think there's a better path to a Western Conference final / Stanley Cup, and it's taking on a Pacific Division. Vegas would be the toughest matchup, in my opinion, of the first 2 rounds because you'd get Edmonton or LA in the second round, and I think you match up well against both of those teams.
That is the thing. Some of what we're talking about here is the difference on I just want to get through the first round, whereas you're looking at how do you get to the best chance to get to that Western Conference final. I do think you're right. I think the Blues have a better chance of beating one of LA or Edmonton in the second round than they would Dallas or Colorado.
Yeah.
But I think that I would have a slight a slight lean in favor of Winnipeg in the first round. All right, Alex was out there at Morning Skate today, and he had a conversation with Dylan Holloway. I want to play this for you guys because it's in regards to Jimmy Snuggerud, without specifically maybe necessarily mentioning Snuggerud. What is the transition like from the college game to the NHL? Here's Alex's brief conversation with Dylan Holloway in the locker room earlier today.
Yeah, I think just the speed of things, obviously. Guys are bigger, faster, stronger. The one thing, too, is the mistakes you make definitely cost a little more. So not to play as tight, but you got to be more conscious of that. Probably game management, you got to be a little smarter. But I'd say the pace, too. The pace is probably the biggest thing.
Does it feel like there's a little bit more structure at the NHL versus the AHL?
Yeah, I'd say so for sure. I think, the AHL is a little more sporadic, in my opinion, but obviously still a really good league. And the NHL, coaches and players are so dialed that everybody's pretty bought into the system, and it's more of a controlled game, I guess.
And that, to me, BK, was the biggest part that I took away from it. You heard him say, at the NHL level, the mistakes can burn you. At the college level, the mistakes can't burn you. Look at that. Look at the playoff game that Jimmy Snuggerud, University of Minnesota, played in. There were a couple of turnovers in the third period that didn't burn them. In the NHL, if you turn the puck over, it could come back and bite you. But what he said there is why I think Jimmy Snuggerud's going to be fine. The NHL is a lot more dialed in. It's got coaches that are more dialed in, players that are more dialed in. You've got coverage if you do make a mistake, if you do slip up. And Snuggerud's going to be playing with Oskar Sundqvist. And my gut tells me by the end of this game, you're going to see neighbors with Sundqvist and Snuggerud. And those are 2 responsible players that play with tenacity that allow Jimmy Snuggerud to just be the sniper. He doesn't have to go out there and be a Selke player. He's coming from college. He's already in that playoff mindset, and he's stepping over the boards with guys like Oskar Sundqvist and Jake Neighbors and Zach Bolduc, who have been playing playoff hockey since February. They'll be able to tell Snuggerud where he needs to be and when he needs to be there. All Snuggerud needs to do is realize that when he gets the puck on his stick, he needs to shoot it.
He's Alex Ferrario. He'll be on the call tonight for the Blues versus the Red Wings right here in your home of the Blues, 101 ESPN. Pregame at 6, puck drop at 7. Alex has the full coverage for you right here on 101 ESPN. With Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, Masyn Winn is working through some stuff right now. What is a fair level of concern about where he's at the plate currently? And did the Cardinals make a mistake in not bringing a backup shortstop to the Major League roster with them to open up this season? We'll talk about that next here on 101 ESPN. Hey, it's BK for my friends over at Victory Men's Health. It is time to unlock your inner champion, and the place to do so is with Victory Men's Health. They can help you out with multiple different potential issues, whether that's low testosterone or erectile dysfunction, weight loss goals that you're trying to meet, that you're having a tough time getting to, or maybe even vitamin deficiencies. They can check that out with their micronutrient lab. That is one of the first things that I did when I walked through the door at Victory Men's Health. They have made me feel like the best version of myself. They will test as well for that low testosterone. There is a healthy range for adult men, and for some of us that dips for us as we continue to get older, and it gets too low into that lower range of that testosterone level. They want to boost that back up into the top range of that healthy normal. They can check that for you over at Victory Men's Health. To book that first appointment today, go online at victorymenshealth.com. Super easy process. Put in your name, email, phone number. Tell them BK with the 101 ESPN sent you, and they can unlock your inner champion today. It's Victory Men's Health and online at victorymenshealth.com.
Giving you the picture, the real big St. Louis sports picture. It's BK and Ferrario on 101 ESPN.
With Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. It's been a rough start to the season for Masyn Winn. It's something that T-Bone had cautioned all of us about leaving spring training. And listen, spring training is, in my opinion, mostly meaningless. But there are certain things that you can look at and say, there's some warning signs here that things might not be going the way that you'd want, especially for a guy like Masyn Winn, who had a pretty tough spring, and that has carried over into the regular season. So far this year, 0 for 14 with 7 strikeouts. The strikeouts to me, T-Bone and Alex, are what are most alarming, because he is not a guy last year that struck out very often. He struck out 109 times in 585 at-bats. That is a guy that does not have that as a significant part of his game. So if there was reason for concern, not just for the now, but for this to potentially be a longer-term issue, that's probably it. But if you asked me, hey, BK, what's your level of concern, scale of 1 to 10 right now about Masyn Winn? I'd say like a 3. I don't think this is something that is going to be a long-term problem for him. If If you then ask me a follow-up question, though, of, hey, what is your level of concern about, like, him reaching that next ceiling that we had previously been talking about? Could he be a 20% above league average hitter? Yeah, I'm worried about that, especially for this year. I don't necessarily know that this is going to be the season that takes place, but I still think Masyn Winn can be a average to slightly above league average hitter, play Gold Glove caliber defense at shortstop, be a threat on the bases, and that's a super valuable player. It's just maybe not reaching that full ceiling of what we thought going into 2025. That's okay. You've got other guys that can potentially reach that ceiling for you offensively.
Can I ask a follow-up to your follow-up, Brandon?
Please do.
What's the concern of you BKOing Masyn Winn when you said that
10.
He's going to be the face of the franchise and a Hall of Famer?
Yeah, 10. Or Jimmy Rollins, 10.
Yeah. I
didn't even have that as a thought that crossed my mind, but I'm glad that you brought that up, Alex. It's a fair concern.
The listeners are curious, is why I was asking.
Somebody on the text line said, guys, last year he got off to a slow start as well. Last year he hit 333 in the first weekend.
I didn't think he got off to a slow start.
No, he didn't.
He had a 300 average in April, a 310 average in May, and then finally it came back down to earth in June where he had a 260 average. So he got off to a blistering start in 2024. It's just been a tough one for him this year.
I'll say this. I'm not concerned about it because I go back to the conversation we had with Masyn Winn when he was in Memphis. And he told us, he's like, look, sometimes it takes me a little bit of time to get adjusted, but once I get adjusted, I'm ready to run with it. And look, baseball has made an adjustment to Masyn Winn because he was really good last year. So pitchers are going to approach him differently. Teams are going to approach him differently. And Masyn Winn has to find a way to adjust. That's just how this goes as a pro athlete. You adjust, they adjust. You have to keep adjusting. So am I concerned about it? No. Does it look good right now? Yeah, it looks awful. But I think Masyn Winn is a gamer, he's competitive, and he realizes that people are going to approach him differently, so now he has to make the adjustments, and that's where I'm curious to see what it looks like. Let's talk in June if he's still having this problem.
Yeah. I would say I'm at probably a 5 is where I would be on a scale of 1 to 10 because there are some alarming things. You mentioned the strikeouts, and it's not even just the strikeouts now. This is a trend that went back to spring training where he struck out about 30% of the time in the spring, and then you look at where he was in terms of his strikeout rate last year, 17%. But he's hitting the ball hard at a decent clip so far, which is an encouraging sign. My concern, and it's reason I would say it's at like a 5, and it probably is more of the conversation that you said of, am I worried about him not being like a league average guy or more of like not taking that next step? I'm probably more my concern level goes towards taking that next step is because I think he's trying to sell out for too much power right now. I think he's trying to pull the ball too much and not sticking with what got him to the leadoff spot last year. And I think that's the concern for me is he's changed his approach completely. And I know you're on the side of, hey, spring training doesn't really matter. And there is some of that I can look at and say, you know what, that's fair to an extent. But anytime a guy goes through a 4 for 50 spell in spring training and then it carries into the first 4 games of spring training, into the regular season, tells me something's wrong. And it tells me that there is some level of concern that, hey, whatever he changed didn't work in spring training, and now he might feel like he's caught in between of, okay, do I go back to the things that I tried to work on in the offseason to make my swing better to generate more power, or do I need to abandon it and get back to being more of the contact hitter?
Yeah, and to be clear on what that is, at least according to Ollie Marmol, he was on a different show earlier today, and he said it's a stride thing. So the stride that he's taking leading into the pitch seemingly is getting a little exaggerated, and they believe that's a timing mechanism. So if he can get that figured out, then he should be fine. We'll see. Like you said, he is hitting the crap out of the baseball. Like he's hitting it much harder than he did a year ago. And if that continues, I think over time, as he gets, no pun intended, the timing figured out, I think Masyn Winn's going to be fine. If you're talking about concern level, T-Bone, are you talking about like you're concerned he's going to be bad offensively? Like, clarify what you mean by your level. When you say on a scale of 1 to 10, you're at like a 5 in terms of your concern about Masyn Winn. What do you mean by that?
I think he's going to be a guy that ends up being like 10% below league average.
Is that a big deal if he's heading 9th for you?
I think it's a little alarming considering what we've seen from young guys that struggle when they're up here at the big league club and have kind of that rubber band effect.
That's different than those. Those guys are like horrible.
Supposed to be
like,
stars.
Can't be in the lineup bad. Like last year, Nolan Gorman was like 30%. Like he was so bad, he was striking out 40% of the time. Jordan Walker was so bad that he was not just a replacement level player. He was like a negative wins above replacement, dude. He was terrible a year ago. Dylan Carlson, unplayable against right-handed pitching. So The reason why I'm asking this as a follow-up question is certainly not to attack you at all, but like,
yeah, it only felt that way.
When you have a guy that you say you're worried about him being 10% below league average, that is quite different, we can agree, than what these other sophomore slumps looked like for the Cardinals.
Sure, but I think anytime you see a guy that goes through a struggle like that, I mean, that's what turns everybody on these guys. Now, again, I agree it's not as bad as what Gorman went through or Walker went through or Carlson went through, but that would be an alarming trend instead of seeing someone that would say, hey, went from, I think he was, 2% above league average last year, if I'm not mistaken, to, okay, either staying at that or at least showing strides of making some improvements, and instead you see him regress. Because it's one thing to look at this year and say, hey, you can probably get away with that as your 9-hole hitter that plays, hopefully, Gold Glove level shortstop. But then I would have some concern about, okay, well, what does that mean moving forward for him offensively? Is he going to be a guy that is on the downward trajectory instead of someone that is supposed to be at least leveled out here at the big leagues? That's my concern. I fear that he is the big leagues have figured him out, and offensively now you're talking about a guy because he's too talented to be a guy that is 10% below league average. He's a guy that you can at least say is league average and gives you Gold Glove level defense.
How do you feel about Jeremy Pena? Good player?
I think he's a good player. I think he's a fine piece with the Houston Astros.
But a valuable piece, right? He's a 4-win player. That's a good player. We can agree on that, right?
Yeah, but his war is carried by his defense, right? I assume because his offense isn't there.
Isn't that okay? Can't you have a guy or two in your lineup that are carried by their defense that are like league average hitters? This is where we, and Alex, I think you might be on this page as well. This is where we probably disagree on the value of players. Sometimes guys can have different values that they bring to the table. Masyn Winn, it's okay if you have, let me ask this a different way. How would you have valued Ozzie Smith? In today's game, I'm genuinely asking.
So, man, way to put me in a corner here. I don't know how valuable, in my opinion, Ozzie would be in the modern game. Because though he does provide great defense up the middle, I mean, he wasn't a good hitter. I mean, he finished below league average in OPS plus in his career.
Correct.
And that's a guy. And that's a guy. Yeah. And no wonder why you went with that name. And the reason I bring this up is because when you talk about that guy, if you're not winning baseball games and you start to look at, okay, where do we improve our lineup? And then you start to look at guys that are below league average, and you have to look at them and say, okay, well, we need more offense there.
To me, if you have an offense that is a bad offense because your 9-hole hitter is 10% below league average offensively, then what we should really be talking about is, well, what do you have 3 through 6?
And that's what I was going to. And that's what I was going to say, too. And I think your bigger concern is that there's not going to be another guy that takes over offense for this team. Like Masyn Winn has kind of been cornered into this position of being well, he's got to be the face of the franchise, so he's got to be a difference maker. No, he needs to be another one of those complementary pieces that they always develop. The Cardinals' real issue is needing to go out and find that guy that is the go-to player that helps win baseball games, and Masyn Winn solidifies them.
Just to me, again, I'm only speaking for myself here. Value can come in different forms. And however you extract that value, whether it's defense, base running, hitting, all of the above, and a lot of guys like Jeremy Pena, Masyn Winn, that as long as you bring value to the table and as long as you're contributing towards winning baseball games, I can build around that. It's the guys that are energy suckers from the lineup, like Nolan Gorman last year, where his entire value is the dude puts the ball in the seats. And he's not making contact enough to be able to do that for you. And so he's just an actively bad player for the team. That's where I think you end up running into problems. But if the Cardinals lineup is bad this year, I will have a lot more questions about what happened with Ivan Herrera or Wilson Contreras or Lars Nootbaar or Nolan Arenado, Jordan Walker, those guys that are projected to be middle of the order bats, as opposed to Masyn Winn, who could have a very similar season to what Jeremy Pena did in year 2, where he went from being a guy that slugged .425 in his first year, slugged .381 in his second year, and that's kind of been where he settles in. He's around a .400 slugging percentage for his career. And maybe that's just what Masyn Winn is. Maybe he ends up being a league average hitter, Gold Glove shortstop, 15-plus stolen bases per season. That's not a bad player to have. It just means that guy's probably not going to bat leadoff, and he's certainly not going to bat in the middle of your order. He's probably a 9-hole hitter that's really good defensively and brings value that way. Now I can plug that piece in and build accordingly if I'm in John Mozeliak or now Chaim Bloom's position.
If only, Gersh, if only. I will say one thing, though, that, and maybe this is where I'm looking at it, because am kind of focused on the here and now a little bit more so than long term, because I agree, maybe long term, if you have a guy that's 10% below league average and you do have a like true middle of the order that I could look at and not go, Donovan, then I can potentially say, okay, you can get away with that. But the way that they keep selling this lineup and this construction of this lineup isn't hey, don't worry about that bottom part of the order. It's hey, focus up in the middle, and 2 through 5 are supposed to be the ones that do damage. They keep selling you on this message of, well, hey, those are supposed to be the guys that are kind of the feeders for the top of the order, that 8 and 9 spot. They're supposed to be the ones that are getting on base, causing havoc, and then we can really flip it, and then there we go. Now we've got Newt, we've got Contreras. You almost have to look at that as almost as it truly is the double leadoff spot. And if you got a guy that's down there and he's 10% or worse below league average, I just don't know. I think Winn is a good player, and I think it will be disappointing if he finishes below league average, because to me, he is too talented offensively to be a guy that is not at league average, giving you Gold Glove level defense up the middle.
I'm looking at the 2013 Cardinals. Good lineup. We can all agree, right?
What, 2013?
2013
Yeah.
St. Louis Cardinals. Good lineup?
Yeah.
Game 6 of the World Series. You had John Jay, that was batting 8th in that lineup, and for the season, he was exactly league average offensively. And batting 9th in that lineup on that day was Daniel Descalso, who was 20% below league average offensively that year. I think sometimes we make a little too much of the guys that are batting towards the bottom of your order and not enough of the guys that are batting in the middle.
And their 9 or 8 or 9, or their starting shortstop, that year was Cosma. And Cosma finished well below league average. Yeah. They made an upgrade in the offseason. They went in, they said, we need Johnny Peralta. And that was the year they went out and signed him. And I'm not saying the Cardinals are going to upgrade from Masyn Winn.
But that year, with that lineup that we're talking about, they won 97 games and went to the World Series. So, yes, they decided to upgrade in that spot in the lineup. But they also were capable, because of how great they were that year.
And they had a middle-of-the-order bat that year, too.
Getting to the World
Carlos
Series.
Beltran?
Yeah, they had a great lineup in the middle of the order, yeah. All right, he's Alex, that's T-Bone, I'm BK. Coming up next, we got to dive into some NFL quick hitters. We've got some rule changes that are in, some that are not, going into effect. We'll talk about them next year on BK and Ferrario.
Tanner Hendrickson here with a Sports Center update brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling. Cardinals back in action tonight as it's game 2 of their 3-game set with the LA Angels. 6:45 will be first pitch. Kyle Hendricks will be on the mound for Los Angeles, and Matthew Liberatore will get the start for St. Louis. And the Blues back in action tonight as they take on the Detroit Red Wings. Well, pregame coverage starting at 6 o'clock with Alex Ferrario, and then puck drop with Alex and Joey at 7. The Sports Report is brought to you by Saliga Heating and Cooling, an independent American Standard heating and air conditioning dealer.
This isn't quite the bet that we typically use for NFL quick hitters, but it speaks to what's taking place right now in the NFL. With Alex and T-Bone on BK, it's BK and Ferrario here on 101 ESPN. NFL owners' meetings are taking place right now, Alex, and they are making some rule changes. And for others, maybe the most publicly discussed one specifically, there's no change whatsoever. NFL owners, will start out with this, plan to continue discussions about the Eagles' short yardage tush-push play after tabling the proposal on Tuesday that would otherwise ban it. Alex, at this point, I just don't really care. I know that there are some coaches that are going out and saying, hey, this is a safety issue. No, it's not. You get your ass kicked on it. That's what this is. You don't like the play because you can't stop it and you can't do what the Eagles do. They're the only team that does it with the effectiveness that they have so far, and they did it this year to the point where they won the Super Bowl behind it. Hey, man, if a team comes up with something and it works for them and it is within the rules, I've got no issues with it. In fact, I kind of like it because it promotes more offense. Because if they convert on that 4th and 1, guess what? They get more offensive plays accordingly. So it changes the strategy for them. I would like to see other teams come up with their version of the tush push. What is that? For some teams, it might be an end around. Hey, do you have, Tyreek Hill? Find a way that's unique that gets him the ball in space that is your version of a 90% play on 4th and 1, where you get him the ball in space behind a couple of blockers and boom, first down every time. I think other teams need to get more creative to find their version of this play, and then maybe we'd see more of an equal footing. But I don't have an issue with this. I think they should not ban it personally. What are your thoughts on it, Alex?
I'm with you. I don't know why people get so up in arms about this, with the exception of their team keeps losing to Philadelphia because they convert on the 4th down with the tush push. Like, this to me is the same conversation about the bats that the Yankees are using. And everyone's like, well, they can't use that. That's illegal. No, they just found within the rules a different way to maximize their offense. And the Eagles are following the rules. They're making a play. And if you don't like it, find a way to outperform them. Find a way to stop it. But to sit here and whine that the tush push needs to go away because it's unfair to the other teams, this sounds like a bunch of owners who can't find a way to beat Philadelphia that want the playing field back in their side.
Yeah, I think they should keep it. I mean, it's such a great advantage for the Philadelphia Eagles. And other teams try this. I mean, it goes to show you how well the Eagles are able to do it. I mean, look at what Buffalo did in the playoffs against Kansas City. They tried it with Josh Allen on that, I think it was the 4th down play, and they missed. They didn't get it. It's tough to see with the officials, and they weren't able to spot it well. And they ended up being short. And I think that goes to show you how hard it is to really execute this tush push. Other teams can't do it, and now they're just trying to ban it because they can. I think that's ridiculous. I think they should keep this in the rule book.
We're all on the same page here. All right. Yeah. What they did change, the big one here, is touchbacks. So touchbacks on kickoffs will now be marked off at the 35-yard line. Now, when I first saw this rule change, Alex, and they said this is going to promote fewer touchbacks, they're hoping for more returns. It's like, why? Yeah. Why would you return it if you're going to get the ball at the 35? And then you think about it a little bit further. It's because the team that is kicking it is less likely to kick it into the end zone if they know it's immediately going to come out to the 35. So last year was something like 75% of all returns were just touchbacks. Mm-hmm. They're hoping to promote more returns. It is considered to be one of the more exciting plays in the sport. I'll be honest, man, I don't know how much this is going to work, because the last time that they made a change like this, they also thought that it was going to lead to more returns, and it did for like a month, and then suddenly you saw everybody that basically went to the same thing. They were like, yeah, no, we're just going to kick it into the end zone, and then we'll have our defense go out there. So I'm very skeptical on this. I think within the next 5 years, we will no longer see kickoffs. I think we are closer and closer to the point where you will just start with the ball at your 30-yard line probably, and you just go with the offense from there. You'll still have punts, you'll still have punt returns, but field goals, kick block, etc. I do not think the kickoff will exist 5 years from now, but I get why this is a last gasp. I don't think it's a bad rule change. I just don't think it's going to have the intended effects long enough to dissuade people from going with the death of the kickoff.
Yeah, at some point, teams aren't going to trust their special teams unit anymore, and they're going to say, look, let's not jeopardize this after a couple of run backs for touchdowns, and let's just kick the ball into the end zone. I hope it works. I mean, it's a really smart idea because my thought was the same as yours. If I'm a team, why would I'm not going to do that. I'm going to start at the 35-yard line, but you hope that the kicking team says, no, let's stop them at the 20, and we could start it from there. But I think you're right. Like, this starts off hot and heavy where everyone's like, yeah, look at the new rule. We're getting all these run backs. And then by the third month of the season, teams just don't trust their special teams unit and say, no, we're just going to kick it back to the end zone.
Yeah, I can tell you this is not going to affect Sean McVay. Sean McVay was the first one that was like, I don't care that they start at the 30. I don't want to worry about us having to tackle them. Just kick it out. Just kick it in the end zone. I do wonder, because of what you just said, where a lot of people view the kickoff as one of the more exciting plays in the NFL. I don't know if they'll ever get to a spot where they just get rid of it. I wonder if instead of like pushing back the where you get it on a touchback, where they finally just say, all right, we're bumping the kickers back to where they can't kick it into the end zone. I think that's where they will go. I think that's where this is ultimately heading.
The problem is then you kick it so short that they have the ball starting at like the 40, and now it becomes a play that is just stupid, like totally unnecessary. And at that point in time, my guess is you just get rid of it. I think what they should do, Alex, to me at least, get rid of the kickoffs, and then if you decide that, hey, we want to try for our onside kick, whatever that becomes, just make it a 4th and 15. You start 4th and 15 from the 35, and if you convert, you get the ball at midfield. If you don't, then the other team takes over wherever you stopped. And that becomes the potential, like, one-off type of a play where it used to be a kickoff, and now it becomes this. I think that's it. That's the way that I would personally go for it. I'm shocked that they have not gone to that yet. The onside kick rule, it's been completely neutered to the point where it's damn near impossible. I think it was like 95% of the onside kicks last year were recovered by the opposition. So if there's going to be a rule change that takes effect in the next couple of years that helps with kickoffs in any way, that's the one.
And to your point on the onside kick, is not only is it like 95%, I mean, it is a certain number that teams don't recover it. None of them are typically close, right? Like, it's not like a bunch of like, oh, it's 95%, but like 25% of those, like, it hits off a defender and there's like this mad scramble for the ball. No, these teams have gotten so good with their hands teams and they practice it so much. It truly is just like it looks like a soccer pass, essentially, where you just kick the ball to the guy, he lays on top of it, and then, okay, game's over. It was so unexciting.
All right, last thing here, final rule change of significance that was put into effect. They're changing overtime during the regular season, Alex. It's basically just going to mirror what you have in the postseason to a degree. Both teams are guaranteed a possession. Even if the first team scores a touchdown, the second team is guaranteed a possession, and it's 10 minutes for overtime during the regular season. I'm fine with it. I have no further thoughts.
Yeah,
I wish I could give you some hot takes. I have no issues with it. Seems fine to me.
That was about as vanilla of a rule change as you could have thrown at me and been like, yeah, cool, okay, let's move on, guys.
I'm good with it.
Yep. That was a good GM, or that was a good owners meeting of these rule changes, and they were like, here's what we got, fellas.
The one part of this that I find somewhat interesting is just the strategy of it. If you're the team that gets to the ball first and you do score a touchdown, do you go for 2 now? I think that'll be something that is maybe interesting. And most coaches will not because they're fearful. They're scared.
Dan Campbell will.
Yeah. I love the fact, too, that they cut it down from 15 to 10. Because I also wonder, too, if you're going to see teams that say, let's just chew up a bunch of clock and go score. Sure. And then you're looking at it, you know, if you're the team that gets the ball second, give up a touchdown, and Campbell goes for 2, and you look up and you go, that was a 7.5-minute possession. We have 2.5 minutes to go down and score in overtime?
Yep.
That's the part that I think is exciting. Because if it was just 15 minutes, I think it'd be, okay, this may not have kind of that same kind of push to it of, oh, boy, we're running out of time to really get down the field and score. Now you got that to where I think you're going to see a lot of overtimes. First possession, team takes their time. Second one, it's like, oh, we got to go 2-minute drill to go down there and tie this game up.
Smart, too. You force the other team to take some timeouts early if they're going to hold on to the ball that long.
All right, he's Alex. That's T-Bone. I'm BK. Coming up next, we're going to finish this thing off with the rewind here on BK and Ferrario.
Major League Baseball is back on ESPN. Sunday, Cardinals and Red Sox. Pregame at 5.
anything from today's show, be sure to check it out on the podcast page, 101ESPN.com, and the free 101 ESPN app is where you go to find it. That is sponsored by
Schaefer Door Company.
That 101 ESPN app is free to download, super easy to use, and it is sponsored by Dobbs Tire and Auto Centers. A couple of news bits to get to before we hit our BK and Ferrario Rewind. Drew Pine, Mizzou backup quarterback, has officially entered the transfer portal. There was some erroneous report a few weeks ago, Alex, that Drew Pine was going to be the starter for Mizzou. That was nonsense then. It is obviously nonsense now. He is transferring from the University of Missouri. There is also some news coming out over the last 24 hours. Lance Lynn has officially decided to retire from Major League Baseball. He announced that on his wife's podcast. So Lance Lynn retiring from baseball. I believe he will be a future Cardinals Hall of Famer. Just real quick, Alex, do you think Lance Lynn will be a future Cardinals Hall of Famer, or do you disagree with that?
No, I think he will be a future Cardinals Hall of Famer. I think when it comes down to it, he's the leader in a lot of categories, or at least in the top portion of a lot of the categories. So, yeah, I think he'll be there, and fans loved Lance Lynn.
I agree with you entirely. All right, let's start out with the Cardinals from last night. They end up losing the game. Really, to me, the biggest play of the game was a bad play by Brendan Donovan. And it's a guy that you typically don't see making those kinds of boneheaded mistakes. And he just made a bad decision in that spot. It ended up going to home, got to take the out there. He didn't. It cost them not just that run, but also ended up costing them later on in the inning where they gave up another run as well. So bad spot by him. That ultimately, to me, was the biggest moment of the game that led to them losing 5-4 in 10 innings. But Alex, the offense had 11 hits. They got on base 16 times. The sequencing wasn't necessarily there. 2 for 10 with runners in scoring position. You got to be better than that. But I didn't feel like last night was some massive problematic game for the Cardinals. They just had a couple of miscues defensively, and you could argue maybe a couple of decisions by Ollie that you could argue one way or the other. But other than that, I thought it was mostly a fine game. They just ended up coming out on the losing end of it.
Yeah, I did too. I felt like that was one of those games where you get smacked back to reality. You know, you had a sweep to open up the series of the season, home opener that was sold out. There was a lot of positive vibes going into that next series. And at some point, you're going to get slapped back down to earth. And how do you respond to it? To me, the bigger portion, yes, the Brendan Donovan decision. I thought the Nolan Gorman decision was something, not using him in extras. But again, this is the job that Ollie's going to have, and I think people need to get accustomed to seeing it because there's going to be a lot of instances that we're talking like this.
Yeah, the Donovan one, of course, is the one that ends up turning that game on its head. But I think their lesson they're going to learn from that is, hey, we pulled Herrera probably too soon because you end up with 2 Pajes at-bats. Look, it's clear he's not good defensively. I don't think his framing's looked that great so far this year. He can't throw anybody out on the bases. It's something they're going to have to live with. I'd like to see them as you get closer in these games, if it's 1 run in the 7th and there is an opportunity for him to hit in, say, like the bottom of the 8th, which was going to happen in this scenario, you say, okay, well, hopefully we just trust our relievers. They're not going to let guys get on base, and hopefully they can shove. And then when we get to that point in the 8th inning after his last at-bat, then we can replace him.
It is worth noting, Ollie said today on another show that Wilson Contreras was the one that put the bunt down for himself. That was not a call from the dugout. That was a Wilson Contreras call. I did not agree with it at the time. I continue to disagree with it now, but it is what it is. He said he's not feeling great at the plate. If he was feeling great, he's probably hitting there. Instead, he decided to lay down a bunt. If you were going to play the lineup game with the fast lane later on today, for the next 30 seconds or so, go ahead and turn down your radio. Today in the lineup, Pedro Pajes is starting behind the plate, so they'll be going with him. I do wonder if that's partially, hey, Matthew Liberatore's on the mound. We've got to get answers on Matthew Liberatore here. We're going to put our best defensive catcher behind the plate. I don't think that's necessarily a bad decision there. They also have Nolan Gorman starting at designated hitter today, so it is an off day for both Ivan Herrera and Wilson Contreras, and they pushed a bunch of their lefties up in the lineup today.
Quick, also tinfoil to that. I also wonder if they're playing the weather moving into the area. This way you get at-bats for Gorman, not 2 days off, because I doubt they play tomorrow with the system that's coming in, and I doubt they are able to make up that game on Thursday. This gets you Pajes in, to your point on Libby, but for Gorman, I also think it helps, hey, let's get him an at-bat rather than going like 4 days without him seeing
Last
pitching.
thing, Alex is on the call tonight for the Blues versus the Red Wings. Pre-game with Alex begins at 6. Puck drop with Alex begins at 7. Alex Snuggerud in the lineup tonight. What are you looking for in this one?
Just that shot, man. I want to see what this shot looks like. It's been hyped for the last 3 years since he was drafted, and you're finally going to get to see it. Does he get a look on the power play? Does he potentially score on the power play? I think that is where he could really take this team to the next level, having that lethal shot. And then it's what else you do away from the puck to keep you in the lineup.
All right, Alex Ferrario going to be on the call for that. Looking forward to it. Be sure to tune in as Alex has the broadcast tonight. He'll do a fantastic job here on 101 ESPN. For Alex and T-Bone, I'm BK. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. The Fast Lane's coming up next here on 101 ESPN.
Reimagine your front porch as a cozy retreat, perfect for relaxing at the end of a long day. Mosby Building Arts Spring Porch Sale is blooming, but hurry.